Somewhere along the way, we learned to measure our worth in other people's eyes. Their praise made us feel safe. Their silence made us doubt ourselves. Their rejection seemed to prove something was wrong. But Buddhism teaches that approval is never a home. People change. Opinions change. Even praise disappears. The need to be accepted can become a chain, pulling us from truth, peace, and the life we should live. The 25 stories ahead follow people caught inside that chain. Monks, parents, workers, rulers, and wanderers, each one is searching for freedom. Not freedom from people, but freedom from needing everyone to agree. These are stories about returning to yourself, listening and walking forward without asking the world for permission. We begin with a young monk who had forgotten the sound of his own voice. Wherever you are right now, this is for you. He was not dishonest. He was not trying to trick anyone. He only wanted to be liked. And wanting to be liked had slowly taught him how to disappear. When an older monk said his teaching was too soft, he made it harder. When another monk said it was too strict, he made it gentle again. When villagers praised his stories, he told more stories. When they said they wanted something practical, he stopped telling them. He watched every face while he spoke. A lifted eyebrow could change his whole message. A quiet room could make him doubt every word. A smile could make him believe he was wise. A frown could make him feel like a failure. We recognize this. Many people do not speak from what they know. They speak from what they hope others will accept. They enter a room as one person and leave as another. They become skilled at reading faces, changing tone, hiding thoughts, and giving people the answer that causes the least trouble. This can look like kindness. Sometimes it is fear. The young monk lived in a small monastery near a wide river. He had been there for 7 years. He knew the chants. He knew how to sweep the courtyard before sunrise. He knew how to sit still when his legs hurt. But he did not know how to remain himself when someone disagreed with him. His teacher noticed. One morning, the teacher asked him to speak to a group of farmers. The monk told them that peace came from patience. Afterward, one farmer said, "Patience is only for people too weak to act." The monk quickly agreed. He said peace also came from bold action. Another farmer frowned. "Bold action causes conflict," he said. The monk agreed with him too. By the end, he had said so many different things that no one knew what he believed, not even him. That evening, his teacher called him into the meditation hall. A single lamp burned between them. The teacher placed a sealed letter on the floor. "Take this to the temple beyond the eastern hills," he said. The young monk bowed. "What should I say when I arrive?" "Give them the letter." "Which road should I take?" "The road east." "Should I stop in the first village?" "You may." "Should I speak to people along the way?" "If speaking is needed." The monk waited for more. None came. He felt uneasy. "What if I make the wrong choice?" The teacher looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Do not ask anyone whether you are doing it correctly." The monk thought he had misunderstood. Anyone? Anyone? Not even another monk? Not even another monk? The teacher pushed the letter toward him. "You have borrowed other people's eyes for too long. Walk until you can see with your own." The next morning, the young monk left. At first, the road was easy. He followed the river through fields of rice and sugarcane. But by midday, the path divided. One road climbed toward the hills. The other curved through a village. He stood between them for a long time. A farmer passed with 2 baskets. The monk almost asked which road was better. The question reached his lips. Then he remembered the instruction. He looked at the sky. He looked at the hills. He listened to the river behind him. The village road was longer, but dark clouds were gathering over the steep path. He chose the village. The moment he began walking, doubt followed him. Perhaps the hill road was faster. Perhaps the clouds would pass. Perhaps a wiser monk would have chosen differently. This is how approval works. Even when no one is speaking, we carry imagined voices inside us. What would they say? Would they approve? Would they think us foolish? The crowd does not always need to be present. Sometimes we build one in the mind. The monk kept walking. In the village, a woman offered him water. He drank and thanked her. She asked where he was going. When he told her, she said, "You should have taken the hill road." His stomach tightened. For a moment, he wanted to turn back. Then thunder sounded. Over the hills, rain began to fall there in heavy sheets. The woman looked toward the storm and said nothing. The monk continued. Something small had changed. He had made a choice. Someone had disagreed, and the world had not ended. By evening, he reached a grove of tamarind trees. A group of travelers sat around a fire. They invited him to eat. During the meal, they began arguing about the Buddha's teaching. One man said suffering came from desire. Another said suffering came from bad luck. A third said suffering came from cruel people. They turned to the monk. "What do you say?" He felt the old habit rise. He wanted to study their faces and give each person a piece of what they wanted. Instead, he became quiet. Then he said, "Suffering has many doors, but attachment keeps us inside." The first man smiled. The second man shook his head. The third laughed. The monk felt heat in his face. He had disappointed two of them, but his words remained standing. He did not chase after them. He did not soften them. He did not change them. That night, lying beneath the trees, he understood something. Disagreement was uncomfortable, but discomfort was not danger. A person could dislike his words, and he could still breathe. A person could misunderstand him, and he could still continue. The next morning, he crossed a stone bridge and entered a town known for its pottery. Rows of bowls, cups, and lamps stood outside small workshops. Near the end of the street, he saw an old potter sitting before a beautiful bowl. The bowl was almost complete. Its shape was balanced, its surface was smooth. But the potter kept touching it, pressing one side then another. 3 customers stood nearby. One said the bowl was too wide, another said it was too narrow, the third said the rim should be higher. The potter changed it for the first man, then for the second, then for the third. Each change damaged something that had once been beautiful. The young monk stopped walking. He watched the potter's nervous hands. He watched the bowl lose its shape beneath too many opinions, and he felt as though he were looking at himself. The potter sighed. "I have worked on this bowl for 12 days, he said, "but I cannot finish it." "Why not?" the monk asked. The potter looked toward the road where more people were coming. "Because someone may not like it." The monk sat beside him. For the first time, he knew exactly what the next story would need to teach them both. The monk sat beside the potter. Between them was the bowl that had almost become beautiful. Almost. The potter had listened to everyone except himself. One visitor wanted the bowl wider. Another wanted it smaller. One said the rim was too plain. Another said decoration would ruin it. The potter changed the bowl each time. He pressed one side. He lifted another. He smoothed what someone disliked and added what someone else requested. The bowl had been ready many times, but each time someone spoke, the potter began again. The monk understood him. He had done the same thing with his teaching. The potter did it with clay. The monk had done it with words. Both were afraid of the same thing. Someone might not approve. The potter placed his hands in his lap. "I want this to be the finest bowl I have ever made," he said. The monk looked at it. "Then why do you keep destroying it?" The potter frowned. "I am improving it." "No," the monk said gently. "You are protecting yourself from criticism." The potter looked away. Sometimes truth does not hurt because it is cruel. It hurts because it reaches the place we have been hiding. The potter had spent many years making bowls. He knew when the clay was ready. He knew how thick the base should be. He knew how wide the mouth should open. His hands had learned things that words could not explain. But the moment someone gave an opinion, all that knowledge disappeared. He trusted a stranger's passing thought more than years of patient work. We do this. We know what matters to us. We know what feels true. Then someone speaks with confidence, and suddenly our own knowing becomes small. We think certainty must mean wisdom. It does not. Some people are only loud. The monk lifted the bowl carefully. It was soft and uneven from too many changes. "Who is this bowl for?" he asked. The potter thought. "For anyone who needs it." "What will they use it for?" "Rice, soup, tea, whatever they choose." The monk turned the bowl in his hands. "And can they use it now?" The potter shook his head. "It must be dried and fired. Then it cannot serve anyone while you keep changing it." The potter said nothing. The monk continued. "A bowl does not become useful because everyone approves of it. It becomes useful when it is finished." The words stayed between them. The potter looked. At the shelves around his workshop, there were dozens of unfinished pieces, a cup without a handle, a plate with one side pressed flat, a water jar with its neck cut away. Each one had stopped because of someone's opinion. The workshop was full of things that might have served people. But fear had kept them soft. Fear had kept them incomplete. This is what the need for approval does. It does not only change us, it delays us. It keeps the book unwritten, the apology unsent, the journey unstarted, the truth unspoken. We tell ourselves we are waiting for the right moment. Often we are waiting for a moment when no one will disagree. That moment does not come. The potter picked up a small wooden tool. He began smoothing the bowl again. The monk stopped his hand. "Are you repairing it?" The potter hesitated. "No." "Then what are you doing?" "I remembered what the merchant said about the rim." The monk smiled. "The merchant has gone, but his words remain." "Yes," the monk said, "that is the problem." The potter slowly put the tool down. For a long time he stared at the bowl. Then he placed both hands around it. His fingers moved with care. Not according to the merchant, not according to the woman who wanted it wider, not according to the man who wanted it plain. He returned to the shape he had first intended. It was not perfect. There was a small mark near the base. One side rose slightly higher than the other. The potter saw these things. He did not hide them. He did not begin again. "It is finished," he said. His voice was quiet, but something inside it had become firm. The monk nodded. The potter carried the bowl to a shaded shelf. They waited for it to dry. During those hours, people came to the workshop. One man said the bowl looked too heavy. A woman said the color of the clay was dull. A child said it was beautiful. The potter listened to all of them, but he did not touch the bowl. This was new. He discovered that listening did not require obeying. He could hear an opinion without turning it into a command. This is a freedom many people never learn. We often think there are only two choices: please everyone or ignore everyone. But the Buddhist path is usually found between these extremes. Listen carefully, consider honestly, then act without attachment to praise or blame. Some criticism can teach us, some praise can encourage us, but neither should own us. By sunset, the bowl was ready for the kiln. The potter placed it inside with several other pieces. Then they lit the fire. The heat rose. The clay hardened. The bowl could no longer be reshaped. The potter sat near the kiln and watched the flames. He looked nervous. "What if it cracks?" he asked. "It may," the monk said. "What if no one buys it?" "That may happen too." "What if they laugh?" The monk looked into the fire. "Then they will laugh." The potter waited for more. None came. The monk had learned something on his journey. Not every fear needs a comforting answer. Sometimes peace begins when we stop demanding guarantees. The bowl might crack, people might reject it, the day might not go as hoped. The practice was not to control the result. The practice was to finish what was true. They waited through the night. At sunrise, the fire had cooled enough. The potter opened the kiln. The bowl remained whole. Its surface had changed. The soft clay was now strong. The small mark near the base was still there, but it no longer looked like a mistake. It looked like proof that a human hand had made it. The potter held it against the morning light. For the first time, he did not ask the monk what he thought. He only smiled. They carried the bowl to the village market. The road was already busy. Farmers arranged vegetables beneath cloth shades. Children ran between baskets. Merchants called out prices. The potter placed the bowl on a wooden table. Some people admired it. Some walked past. One woman picked it up, examined the uneven rim, and put it down. The potter watched her leave. He felt the old pain, but he did not chase her. A little later, an old man bought the bowl. "My wife needs one for her morning rice," he said. The potter wrapped it carefully. The bowl was gone. Not to everyone, to one person who could use it. That was enough. The monk and the potter walked farther into the market. Near the edge stood a small tea stall with its curtain closed. A young woman sat behind it, holding a tray of cups. Steam rose from a kettle. The tea was ready. The cups were clean. Customers were passing, but she would not open the curtain. The potter stopped. "Why is your stall closed?" The woman lowered her eyes. "Because people may not like my tea." The monk looked at the potter. The potter looked at the closed curtain. And the lesson of the unfinished bowl had found its next home. The lesson of the unfinished bowl had found its next home, behind a closed curtain. The tea seller had prepared everything. The water was hot. The cups were clean. The leaves had been measured carefully. A small plate of rice cakes sat beside the kettle, but the curtain remained closed. People passed her stall without knowing that tea was waiting inside. The monk stood near the entrance. The potter stood beside him. The young woman looked at both of them through a narrow opening in the cloth. "Why did you prepare tea if you do not want to sell it?" the potter asked. "I do want to sell it," she said. "Then open the curtain." She held the cloth more tightly. What if they laugh? The market was loud around them. Merchants called out their prices. Children chased one another between baskets. Coins struck wooden tables. Nobody was looking at her stall. But in her mind, everyone was already laughing. We know this kind of fear. Nothing has happened yet. Still, the mind creates the whole scene. People rejecting us. People whispering. People remembering our mistake long after they have gone home. We suffer through an event that has not taken place. Then we call our suffering caution. The monk asked, "What kind of tea do you make?" "Plain tea." "What is wrong with plain tea? The other sellers add ginger, flowers, honey, and expensive spices." "Do you have those things?" "No." "Then why are you trying to serve what you do not have?" The tea seller lowered her eyes. "My mother taught me to make this tea. She sold it here for many years." "Did people drink it?" "Yes." "Did everyone like it?" The woman thought for a moment. "No." The monk smiled gently. "And yet your mother kept opening the stall." The young woman looked at the kettle. Her mother had died during the previous rainy season. Since then, she had come to the market each morning. She prepared the tea exactly as she had been taught. Then she sat behind the curtain. She told herself she was waiting for courage. But courage did not arrive. Fear arrived every day before the first customer. It sat beside her. It told her the tea was too simple. It told her the cups were too old. It told her that everyone remembered her mother and would compare them. That was the part she could not say aloud. She was not only afraid that people would dislike the tea, she was afraid they would say her mother had made it better. Grief often hides inside other fears. We think we are afraid of failure. Sometimes we are afraid that success will still not bring back the person we lost. We think we are afraid of comparison. Sometimes we are afraid that the comparison will prove we cannot continue what someone we loved began. The monk sat on a low wooden stool. "Make me a cup," he said. The tea seller shook her head. "The stall is not open. You do not need an open stall to pour one cup." She hesitated, then she lifted the kettle. Her hands trembled. The stream missed the cup at first and spilled across the table. She quickly reached for a cloth. "I knew this would happen." "What happened?" the monk asked. "I made a mistake. You spilled a little water. It looks foolish." "To whom?" The woman looked around. Nobody had noticed. The monk moved the cup closer. "Pour again." She did. This time, the tea entered the cup. The monk lifted it with both hands. He smelled it. Then he drank. The tea was warm and slightly bitter. It was not rare. It was not decorated with flowers. It was not sweet, but it carried the comfort of something made many times with care. The monk finished the cup. The woman watched his face closely. She was waiting for judgment. "Is it good?" she asked. The monk placed the cup down. "It is honest." She frowned. "That is not an answer. It is the answer you need." The potter smiled because he understood. Only a day earlier, he had wanted the monk to tell him that his bowl was beautiful. Now he saw the same hunger in someone else, the hunger for one sentence that would remove all doubt. But no sentence can do that for long. Praise gives comfort. Then the mind asks for more. Was the praise sincere? Will the next person agree? Will they still approve tomorrow? Approval is food that never satisfies. The monk said, "You made tea with what you had. You prepared it carefully. You offered warmth to a tired person. Why must praise be added before the act has value?" The woman looked at the cup. "I want people to enjoy it. That is natural. I want them to return. That is also natural. Then why should I not care what they think?" "You should care about the tea," the monk said. "You should care whether the water is clean. You should care whether the cups are washed. You should care whether you treat people kindly. But caring about your work is different from needing every person to praise you." The market continued moving around them. A merchant sold 3 baskets of onions. A mother pulled her child away from a pile of clay lamps. A dog slept beneath a cart. Life was happening. The tea seller had been hiding from it. She believed she needed confidence before she could open the curtain. But confidence often comes after the curtain opens, not before. The monk pointed toward the passing crowd. "Some people will find the tea too bitter." She nodded. "Some will say it is too weak." She nodded again. "Some will prefer another stall." Her face tightened. "And some," he continued, "will be cold, tired, and grateful that you are here." The potter reached for the curtain. Then he stopped. "This must be your hand," he said. The woman stared at the cloth. It was only a curtain, a thin piece of faded fabric, but it had become the border between the life she was living and the life she was afraid to enter. She took hold of it. Her hand remained there. The monk waited. He did not encourage her again. Some doors must be opened without applause. The woman pulled the curtain aside. Morning light entered the stall. Nothing terrible happened. No one laughed. Most people did not even notice. This surprised her. We often imagine that everyone is watching us. They are not. Most people are carrying their own worries, their own grief, their own fear of being judged. The tea seller arranged the cups. She wiped the table. Then she called out softly, "Warm tea." Her voice disappeared beneath the noise. She looked at the monk. He said nothing. She tried again, "Warm tea." A few people turned. One kept walking. Another glanced at the stall and looked away. The woman felt the first sting of rejection. It was small. Still, it hurt. She did not close the curtain. Then an old man stopped. He carried a worn cloth bag across one shoulder. A bamboo flute rested inside it. Only the end could be seen. "How much for one cup?" he asked. The woman told him. He placed a coin on the table and sat. Her first paying customer. She poured carefully. The old man drank without speaking. She watched his face just as she had watched the monk's. Finally he said, "This tastes like the tea your mother made." The woman froze. The words she had feared had arrived. Her mother. The comparison. The old life standing beside the new one. "Was hers better?" she asked. The old man looked into the cup. "No," he said. "It was hers. This is yours." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Not because he had praised her, because he had allowed her to be different. The old man finished the tea and touched the cloth bag at his side. The monk noticed the flute. "Do you play?" he asked. The old man's hand moved away from it. "I used to." "Why did you stop?" The old musician looked toward the crowded market. "Because once, many years ago, someone laughed." The tea seller looked at her open curtain. The potter thought of his finished bowl. And the monk understood that one harsh voice had been waiting many years to release its hold on the next person. One harsh voice had been waiting many years to release its hold on the next person. The old musician sat before the open tea stall. His empty cup rested between his hands. The bamboo flute remained inside the worn cloth bag. The tea seller looked at him. "Someone laughed once?" she asked. The old man nodded. "That was enough to make you stop?" He looked toward the market. People were moving past them. Some hurried. Some argued over prices. Some carried baskets, children, worries, and private grief. None of them knew that a man who once made beautiful music was sitting only a few steps away. "That person did not only laugh," the musician said. "He said my playing sounded like a bird caught inside a broken roof." The tea seller tried not to smile at the strange words. The musician noticed. "You see? I was not laughing at your music." "But you wanted to." I was surprised by what he said. "To me, there is no difference." This is what shame does. It makes every smile look dangerous. Every silence becomes judgment. Every turned head becomes proof that we should have remained hidden. Once we have been wounded by one opinion, the mind begins collecting signs that the wound was deserved. The monk watched the old man carefully. "When did this happen?" he asked. 32 years ago." The tea seller stared at him. "You stopped playing for 32 years because of one stranger." The musician looked down. He was not just any stranger. He was a respected merchant. Everyone knew him. "Did he know music?" the monk asked. "I do not know." "Did he play an instrument?" "No." "Had he heard you before?" "No." The monk leaned closer. "Then you gave 32 years of silence to a man who gave you one. Careless sentence." The old musician did not answer. Some truths enter slowly. They must pass through years of excuses before they reach the place where they can be heard. The musician had been young when it happened. He played in the market during a harvest celebration. His hands had trembled at first. Then the music found him. It moved through the flute and into the evening air. Children had danced. An old woman had closed her eyes. A tired farmer had stopped walking. But when the song ended, the merchant laughed loudly. He made the cruel remark. A few people near him laughed too. The musician remembered only that sound. He forgot the dancing children. He forgot the old woman's peaceful face. He forgot the farmer who had remained still until the final note. The mind can take one painful moment and place it over everything else. This is why criticism can feel larger than kindness. Pain demands attention. Praise arrives gently. We remember the wound because the body believes remembering will protect us. But sometimes the memory does not protect us. Sometimes it becomes the prison. The musician had carried the flute ever since. He never left it at home. He repaired the cloth bag when it tore. He cleaned the bamboo when dust gathered. He protected the instrument carefully, but he would not play it. This is another way fear works. We remain close to the life we want, close enough to feel the loss, but not close enough to risk living it again. The tea seller poured him another cup. "You carried the flute today," she said. "I always carry it." "Why?" the musician thought. Perhaps he hoped that one day someone would ask. Perhaps part of him had never agreed to the silence. Perhaps the music had been waiting inside him for 32 years, patient as a seed beneath dry earth. "I do not know," he said. The tea seller looked at her open curtain. That morning she had feared people would laugh at her simple tea. She had opened the stall anyway. The fear had not vanished. It had simply stopped making the decision. "Play one note," she said. The musician shook his head. "I cannot." "You have not tried." "My fingers are old." "Then let the note be old." "My breath is weak." "Then let the note be weak. People will hear." The tea seller looked around. "Yes." The old man tightened his grip on the cup. "That is the problem." The monk said, "No. The problem is that you believe hearing must always lead to approval." The musician looked at him. "What else should music be for?" "To be played. That is all." "That is enough." The musician shook his head. "If people dislike it, then I have failed." The monk lifted the empty clay bowl from the potter's table. "Is this bowl a failure because one woman did not buy it?" "No." "Is the tea a failure because one person finds it bitter?" "No." "Then why must a song belong to everyone before it is allowed to exist?" The musician looked at the flute bag. He had no answer. The tea seller reached toward it. Then she stopped before touching it. "This must be your hand," she said. The same words the potter had spoken to her at the curtain. The lesson had moved again. The old man slowly opened the bag. The flute was darker than it had once been. Small marks covered the bamboo. His fingers remembered where to go before his mind did. He lifted it, then lowered it. A group of boys passed the stall, laughing loudly. The musician stiffened. "They are laughing already." "They have not heard you," the tea seller said. "But they might." "Yes." The old man looked at her. She did not promise that no one would laugh. She did not promise that the music would be beautiful. She only waited. This is the kind of encouragement that respects another person. Not the promise that nothing painful will happen, the reminder that pain can happen and we can still continue. The musician raised the flute again. He placed it near his lips. His first breath produced only a thin, broken sound. He quickly pulled away. A man carrying vegetables glanced toward them. The musician's face burned. "I knew it." The monk said nothing. The tea seller poured tea into another cup. The potter adjusted the bowls on his table. The market continued. The broken sound had entered the world, and the world had survived it. The musician tried again. The second note was clearer, not perfect, but alive. Then came another. His fingers moved slowly. The melody was uncertain at first. It stumbled. It stopped. It began again. The old man closed his eyes. The market faded from him. The cruel merchant faded. The laughter from 32 years ago became smaller. Not gone, only no longer the loudest sound. The music grew stronger. It was a simple village melody. The kind played during planting season. The kind mothers hummed while washing clothes by the river. The kind old people remembered before they remembered where they had first heard it. A child stopped beside the stall, then a woman carrying onions. A farmer rested his basket on the ground. The tea seller stood behind her cups, listening. Some people kept walking. One man frowned at the noise. Another covered his ears for a moment. But an old woman smiled. A little girl began moving her feet. The musician saw all of them, the approval, the indifference, the dislike. For the first time, he allowed them to exist together. This is freedom, not a world where everyone approves, a mind that no longer collapses when someone does not. When the melody ended, the market remained quiet for one breath. Then a few people clapped. The old man opened his eyes. He felt joy rise in him, but the monk noticed something important. The joy had begun before the applause. It had begun while the flute was still at his lips. The music itself had been enough. The musician lowered the instrument. His hands were shaking. "I thought I had lost it," he said. "You lost the years," the monk replied, "not the music." The old man looked sad. 32 years could not be returned. The monk saw this. "Do not use regret to create another silence," he said. "Play now." So the musician played a second song, then a third. Some people stayed, others left. A merchant asked him to stop because customers could not hear the prices. The old man moved a little farther from the stalls and continued. One person's dislike had not ended the music. It had only shown him where not to stand. Near the edge of the market, a wandering woman heard the melody. She wore a faded robe and carried a small travel bag. A sealed letter rested inside her hands. She had written it many months earlier. She had carried it through 3 villages, but she had never sent it. The music drew her closer. When the final note faded, she stood before the old man with tears in her eyes. "My husband loved that song," she said. The musician bowed his head. "Is he far away?" "He is gone." She looked down at the sealed letter. "But there is someone still living whom I am afraid to face." The tea seller saw how tightly the widow held the letter, as though the paper might escape, as though the words inside it might become real if she loosened her hands. The monk offered her a seat. The widow sat beside the flute that had finally been heard, and the next fear arrived, carrying words that had never been sent. The next fear arrived carrying words that had never been sent. The widow sat beside the tea stall. The sealed letter rested in her lap. Her fingers moved over the edge again and again. The old musician placed his flute across his knees. The tea seller poured her a cup. The monk waited. No one asked what the letter said. Some words need silence before they can be spoken. The widow looked toward the road. "I wrote this 8 months ago," she said. "Who is it for?" the tea seller asked. "My sister." "Does she live far away?" "Across the river." The potter looked toward the distant hills. "You have carried it all this time." The widow nodded. "Why?" She held the letter more tightly. "Because I do not know what she will do when she reads it. We know this place. We know what it is to prepare the truth and still be unable to release it. We write the message. We practice the apology. We imagine the conversation many times. Then we wait. We tell ourselves we are waiting for the right moment. Often, we are waiting for a guarantee. We want to know the other person will understand. We want to know they will forgive us. We want to know our honesty will be welcomed. But life does not give these promises. The monk asked, "What happened between you and your sister?" The widow looked into the tea. For a moment, her face became much younger. "When our mother became ill, my sister cared for her. I lived in another village with my husband. I visited when I could." Her voice weakened. "My sister believed I should have done more." "Did she say that?" "Yes." "Was she right?" The widow closed her eyes. "In some ways." The answer cost her something. Truth often does. She continued. My husband was also sick then. I was afraid to leave him alone, but I did not explain myself well. I became angry because I felt judged. My sister became angry because she felt abandoned. The musician listened quietly. The widow said, At our mother's funeral we argued. What did you say? The monk asked. The widow looked away. I said she only cared for our mother because she wanted everyone to praise her. The tea seller stopped moving. The widow's eyes filled. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel when I said it, but I was hurt, and I wanted her to hurt too. This is one of the most human things we do. When pain enters us, we look for somewhere to place it. We call it honesty. We call it justice. We say the other person deserves to understand how we feel, but sometimes we are only passing the wound forward. The widow's sister had not spoken to her since that day. The widow's husband died 3 months later. After his death, the silence between the sisters became heavier. Grief had taken the husband. Pride had taken the sister. The widow found herself alone with words she wished she could return. At first, she waited for her sister to write. Then she waited for her sister to hear about the death and come. When no one came, anger protected her. She does not care, the widow told herself. She has always believed she is better than me. But anger is often easier to carry than regret. Anger lets us stand upright. Regret makes us kneel. One night, the widow wrote the letter. She apologized for the words spoken at the funeral. She explained her fear. She explained her husband's illness. She did not excuse herself. She simply told the truth. Then she sealed the letter. The next morning, she walked toward the river. Halfway there, she turned back. The next week, she tried again. Again, she returned home. Eventually, carrying the letter became part of her daily life. It remained inside her travel bag, close enough to remind her, hidden enough to protect her. The monk asked, What are you afraid your sister will say? That it is too late. She may. That she does not forgive me. She may not. That she does not want me in her life. That may also be true. The widow looked at him with pain. You are not helping. The monk nodded. I am not trying to make the result safe. Then what are you trying to do? To help you see what belongs to you and what does not. The widow said nothing. The monk pointed toward the letter. The apology belongs to you. Then he pointed across the river. Her answer belongs to her. The widow's lips trembled. But what if I do the right thing and she rejects me? Then you will have done the right thing and been rejected. The words were plain, almost too plain. We often want wisdom to remove pain. Sometimes wisdom only removes confusion. The pain may remain, but we finally know what to do with it. The widow looked toward the market. People were listening to the old musician play again. Some smiled, some ignored him. One man complained about the noise. The musician kept playing. The widow looked at the tea seller's open curtain. She saw the potter's finished bowls. Each person had acted without knowing how others would respond. The monk said, You are using your sister's possible rejection to avoid your own responsibility. The widow lowered her head. I thought I was protecting myself. You are protecting yourself from one pain by choosing another. She knew he was right. Each day she did not send the letter. The silence continued. Each day she waited for certainty. The distance grew. The letter could not guarantee forgiveness, but keeping it could guarantee nothing changed. The tea seller placed a fresh cup before her. My first customer could have hated my tea, she said. The potter added, The bowl could have cracked. The musician touched his flute. They could have laughed again. The widow looked at them. And you still did it. They nodded. This is where courage often comes from, not from becoming fearless, from seeing ordinary people act while still afraid. The widow picked up the letter. The seal was worn from months of handling. What should I write on the outside? She asked. The monk smiled. You know her name. I mean, should I add something? Is there something true you have not already said? The widow thought. Then she shook her head. Then do not decorate the truth because you are afraid it is not enough. The river was a short walk from the market. The monk, the potter, the tea seller, and the musician went with her. At the riverbank, several boats waited. A boatman stood beside the largest one. He wore a bright red scarf and spoke loudly to every passenger. "You will not find a better boatman on this river," he said. "Ask anyone." A farmer stepped into the boat. The boatman asked, "Was my last crossing smooth?" The farmer nodded. "Say it louder," the boatman replied. A woman carrying chickens entered next. "Tell the others how skilled I am." The woman looked uncomfortable. The boatman laughed and praised himself again. The widow approached him. "I need this letter taken to the village across the river." The boatman examined it. "I can deliver it. No one crosses faster than I do." He looked at the others. "Is that not true?" The potter said nothing. The tea seller looked away. The musician adjusted his flute bag. The boatman frowned. "You have heard of me, surely?" The monk said, "We have heard you speak of yourself." The boatman did not understand the difference. The widow held out the letter. Her hand trembled. "Will you deliver it?" "Of course, and when I return you will tell everyone how well I carried it." The widow almost pulled the letter back. The monk saw the fear return, not fear of the river, fear of what waited beyond it. He said softly, "Doing what is right does not control what comes back." The widow breathed in. Then she placed the letter in the boatman's hand. For 8 months she had carried it. Now it was gone. The boat pushed away from the shore. The widow watched until the red scarf became small across the water. She did not know whether her sister would forgive her. She did not know whether a reply would come. But for the first time, the silence between them no longer belonged entirely to fear. The boatman raised his voice from the river. "Look how straight I keep the boat." He turned toward his passengers. "Tell me you have never crossed so smoothly." The monk watched him, searching every face for praise. The widow had finally released one letter. The boatman had not yet released his need to be admired. And the river was about to teach him what applause could not. The river was about to teach him what applause could not. The boatman stood proudly at the back of the boat. One hand held the long wooden oar, the other rested on his waist. The widow's letter was tucked safely inside a dry cloth bag near his feet. Several passengers sat before him. A farmer with 2 baskets, a woman carrying 3 chickens, a young mother holding a sleeping child, an old man with a walking stick. The boatman looked at them one by one. "Have you ever crossed this river so smoothly?" he asked. No one answered. The farmer watched the water. The woman tried to keep the chickens quiet. The mother adjusted the cloth around her child. The old man closed his eyes. The boatman's smile disappeared. He moved the oar harder through the water. "Perhaps you did not hear me." The farmer looked up. "We heard you." "And?" "And what?" The boatman frowned. "You could say something about my skill." The farmer shrugged. "We have not reached the other side yet." The boatman felt insulted. He had crossed the river for 20 years. He knew every shallow place. He knew where the current pulled east after heavy rain. He knew which rocks hid beneath the surface. But knowing these things was not enough for him. He needed people to notice that he knew them. We recognize this. Sometimes we do good work, but the work does not feel complete until someone praises us. We help and then wait to be thanked. We speak kindly and then watch to see whether anyone noticed. We give something and feel hurt when the receiver does not respond with enough gratitude. The action may be sincere, but attachment follows behind it. The boatman had not always been this way. When he was younger, he crossed the river because his father taught him. His father was quiet. He never spoke about being the best. He only checked the rope. He studied the clouds. He listened to the water. "People do not enter a boat to admire you," his father once said. "They enter because they want to reach the other side." The young boatman understood then, but years passed. People began praising his smooth crossings. They called him fearless. They told travelers to look for the man with the red scarf. At first he smiled and continued working. Then the praise became something he expected, then something he needed. Silence began to feel like disrespect. Another boatman's success began to feel like a threat. He no longer heard the river clearly because he was always listening for compliments. The old passenger opened his eyes. "The current is changing," he said. The boatman glanced at the water. "It always changes here." The old man looked at the western sky. Dark clouds had gathered. "You should move closer to the southern bank." The boatman laughed. "I know this river better than anyone." The old man said nothing more. This angered the boatman. He wanted the man to argue. Then he could prove himself. He wanted the passengers to see how much he knew. Instead, they remained quiet. Silence can feel unbearable to a person who depends on approval. The mind begins filling it. They do not respect me. They think I am foolish. They are comparing me to someone else. Nothing has been said. Still, the wound becomes real. The boatman began telling stories about difficult crossings. He spoke of a flood from 10 years earlier. He described saving a merchant's goods. He told them about guiding a boat through heavy fog. The passengers listened politely. Then the sleeping child woke and began crying. The mother whispered to him. The chickens flapped inside their basket. The farmer leaned over to check his load. No one praised the boatman. Then the wind changed. It came suddenly across the river. The red scarf lifted from the boatman's shoulder. The water, calm only moments before, broke into small, rough waves. The old man opened his eyes again. The storm is close. This time the boatman did not laugh. The sky had darkened. Rain moved toward them like a grey wall. He pushed the oar deep into the water. The boat turned slightly. A strong gust struck the side. One chicken escaped its basket. It beat its wings and flew into the young mother's lap. The child screamed. The farmer grabbed the edge of the boat. The old man's walking stick fell. Everyone began speaking at once. Sit still. Hold the child. Catch the chicken. Turn the boat. The boatman shouted, Do not worry. I am the finest boatman on this river. No one cared. Another wave struck. Water spilled over the side. The farmer grabbed a small cup and began throwing it out. The woman pulled the chicken close. The mother covered her child with her body. The old man held the dry cloth bag containing the widow's letter above the rising water. The boatman looked at their faces. No admiration, no praise, only fear. And for the first time, he understood that his words could not carry them. The river did not care about his reputation. The wind did not know his name. The storm would not become gentle because people called him skilled. He stopped speaking. He placed both hands on the oar. The boat moved sideways. He corrected it. A wave pushed them north. He turned the bows south. Rain struck his face. The red scarf came loose and disappeared into the river. He watched it float away for one moment. Then he let it go. There was no time to protect the image he had created. There was only the boat, the passengers, the next breath, the next movement. This is what real attention feels like. It does not ask how we look. It asks what the moment requires. The boatman planted his feet. He listened to the water, not to the passengers, not to the imagined praise waiting on the shore. The water. His father's lessons returned. Do not fight the strongest current directly. Angle the boat. Use the wind when you can. Keep the weight balanced. One passenger began praying loudly. Another called the boatman's name. He did not answer. He no longer needed them to believe in him. He needed his hands to remain steady. The storm grew stronger. The boat rose and fell. The widow's letter slipped from the old man's grip. The farmer caught it before it touched the water. He held it inside his shirt. The boatman saw this and nodded. No words, no praise, only people helping one another because help was needed. The boat moved toward the southern bank. A tree bent over the water ahead. Its branches reached low. The boatman turned sharply. The farmer leaned in the opposite direction. The woman held the child while the mother scooped water from the boat. The old man used his stick to push away a floating branch. For several minutes, no one was only a passenger. Each person became part of the crossing. Then the water became shallower. The bottom of the boat struck mud. The farmer jumped out. The boatman followed. Together they pulled the boat toward the shore. The passengers climbed onto the wet ground. The storm continued, but they had reached land. The boatman stood breathing heavily. His hands shook. The young mother held her child close. The woman counted her chickens. The farmer returned the letter. It remained dry. The old man looked at the boatman. "That was a difficult crossing," he said. The boatman waited. The old hunger rose. He expected the next words. "You were brilliant. You saved us. You are the finest boatman on the river." But the old man only added, "Your hands became quiet." The boatman looked at them. Mud covered his arms. A blister had opened on one palm. He understood. His best work had happened after he stopped asking whether anyone saw it. The farmer said, "Thank you." The mother bowed. The others gathered their belongings. The praise came, but it felt different now, pleasant, warm, and not necessary. The boatman carried the widow's letter to the nearby village and gave it to a messenger. Then he began walking back toward the river. His red scarf was gone. For the first time in years, he did not miss being recognized. Near the road, he saw a farmer kneeling in wet soil. The storm had passed over this place. Rainwater filled the small lines in the field. The farmer dropped seeds into the earth one by one. Several villagers stood nearby, laughing. "You are planting too early," one called. "The seeds will rot," said another. "You always think you know better than everyone." The farmer continued planting. He did not defend himself. He did not ask them to. Trust him. The boatman stopped beside the road. He had spent years needing praise for every crossing. This farmer was being mocked and still kept working. The boatman watched another seed disappear beneath the soil. And the next lesson began where no applause could be heard. And the next lesson began where no applause could be heard. The farmer knelt beside the road. His hands were covered in wet soil. A small cloth bag of seeds hung from his waist. One by one he pressed the seeds into the ground and covered them gently. Behind him the villagers laughed. "You are planting too early," one man called. "The true rains have not arrived." Another woman shook her head. "You will lose every seed." A third villager pointed at the open sky. "One short storm does not make a rainy season." The farmer heard them. He continued planting. The boatman stood beside the road and watched. He knew what it felt like to want people's approval, but he did not understand how this farmer could keep working while everyone mocked him. "Why do you not answer them?" the boatman asked. The farmer placed another seed into the earth. "What should I say?" "Tell them you know what you are doing." The farmer looked at the villagers. "They have already decided that I do not." "Then prove them wrong." The farmer smiled. "The field will answer when it is ready." Then he returned to his work. The boatman sat beneath a nearby tree. He had planned to walk directly back to the river. Instead, he stayed. There was something peaceful in the farmer's movements. He did not hurry. He did not look over his shoulder after every seed. He did not search the villagers' faces for signs that they were changing their minds. He planted, covered, moved forward, planted again. We recognize how unusual this is. Most of us say we do not care what others think. Then one doubtful voice reaches us and our peace disappears. We begin explaining ourselves. We give long reasons no one asked for. We defend choices that once felt clear. Sometimes we stop doing what we believe is right, not because new wisdom has appeared, but because someone laughed. The farmer was not refusing advice. He had spent his whole life listening. He listened to older farmers. He listened to traders who spoke about grain prices. He listened to his wife when she noticed changes in the wind. He listened to children who saw insects gathering near the river. But listening was not the same as surrendering his judgment. This year, the dry season had lasted longer than usual. The village elders believed the rains would come late. Most farmers had decided to wait, but this farmer had noticed small things. Ants were moving their eggs toward higher ground. Birds that usually remained near the river were flying inland. The evening wind carried the smell of distant rain. The soil beneath the hard surface had begun to soften. These signs had guided his father, and his father's father before him. The farmer could not prove that the rains were coming, but he had learned to trust careful attention. The villagers trusted the common opinion. The farmer trusted what he had seen. There is a difference between acting from wisdom and acting from pride. Pride says, "I must be right because I am different." Wisdom says, "I may be wrong, but I have looked carefully, and this is the honest choice I can make." The farmer knew the seeds might fail. He knew the villagers might be correct. He planted without certainty. That was what made his calm real. The boatman asked, "Are you sure the rain will come?" "No." The answer surprised him. "Then they may be right." "They may. You could lose your whole crop." "I could." The boatman frowned. "Then why are you calm?" The farmer sat back on his heels. "Because calm does not come from knowing the future. Where does it come from? From knowing why you chose." The farmer opened his palm. Several seeds rested there. "My family needs food. The ground is ready beneath the surface. The signs tell me rain is close. Waiting also carries danger. If I plant now and fail, I will learn. If I wait only because people laugh, I will lose something more than seeds." "What will you lose?" "My trust in my own eyes." The boatman looked toward the river. For years he had trusted the faces of his passengers more than the water. If they praised him, he felt skilled. If they remained silent, he doubted himself. During the storm, their praise had become useless. Only his attention had mattered. The farmer placed the remaining seeds into the soil. The villagers eventually grew tired of laughing. One by one, they left. Their voices disappeared down the road. The farmer continued working exactly as before. This is another truth about public opinion. It often feels powerful because it is loud, but loud. Things do not always remain. People speak, they judge. Then they return to their own lives. We are often the ones who keep their voices alive. The farmer finished one row and began another. The boatman helped him cover the seeds. By sunset, half the field had been planted. No more rain came that day. The next morning, the sky was clear. The villagers passed the field and laughed again. "Where is your rain?" The farmer waved to them. Then he checked the soil. It was still damp beneath the surface. On the second day, the sun grew hotter. The ground began drying. The farmer's wife stood at the edge of the field. "Are you worried?" she asked. "Yes." "Do you regret planting?" "Not yet." She nodded and brought him water. She did not praise him. She did not tell him he was right. She simply sat beside him. This kind of support is rare, not approval, presence, the freedom to let someone make an honest choice without demanding that they succeed. By the third day, doubt entered the farmer's mind. Of course it did. Being calm does not mean doubt never arrives. It means doubt is not immediately placed in control. The farmer walked through the field. He imagined the seeds drying beneath him. He imagined the villagers pointing at the empty ground. He imagined his children asking why there was no harvest. For a moment, he wanted to dig up one row and see whether the seeds had begun to open, but he stopped. A seed cannot grow if it is pulled from the earth every time the farmer becomes afraid. Some things need darkness, some choices need patience. We cannot keep disturbing them to ask whether they are working. That evening, clouds appeared in the east. The villagers saw them too, but the clouds passed without rain. More laughter came the next morning. The farmer felt the words this time. He was human. He wanted to be proven right. He wanted the rain to fall while everyone was watching. Then he noticed this desire, and he let it go. Rain was needed for the seeds, not for his reputation. This is how attachment hides inside a good decision. We begin by doing what is right. Then we start hoping the result will embarrass those who doubted us. The work becomes mixed with revenge. The farmer did not want that poison in his field. So he returned to the reason he had planted: food, care, responsibility, not victory. On the fifth night, the wind changed. The farmer woke before dawn. The air smelled heavy. A low sound moved across the roof. Then rain began. Not a few drops, not a short passing storm. A deep, steady rain. It fell across the village. It entered the fields. It filled the narrow paths between the houses. The farmer stood beneath the doorway with his wife and watched. He did not cheer. He did not run to wake the villagers. He placed his hands together and bowed his head. The rain continued for 3 days. When the sun returned, small green shoots began breaking through the soil. The villagers came to see them. Some praised the farmer, some claimed they had always believed he might be right. Others remained silent. The farmer treated them all the same. He knew how quickly laughter could become praise, and how quickly praise could become laughter again. Neither was stable enough to build a life upon. A few days later, a young village leader came to the field. He wore a clean robe and carried a wooden writing board. The village had chosen him only months earlier. Since then, he had slept badly. Every decision pleased one group and angered another. He had heard about the farmer who planted while everyone laughed. He found him pulling weeds between the new plants. "How did you remain calm?" the leader asked. The farmer looked at the young man's tired face. He saw someone carrying too many voices. He placed the weeds aside. Then he said, "Sit with me." The young leader sat among the green shoots. Around them, the field moved softly in the morning wind. The farmer had learned to act without waiting for the village to agree. Now the young leader would have to learn that listening to everyone did not mean obeying everyone. The farmer had learned to act without waiting for the village to agree. Now the young leader would have to learn that listening to everyone did not mean obeying everyone. He sat among the green shoots. His robe was clean. His face was tired. The farmer could see that the young man had not come only to ask about rain. He had come because too many voices were living inside him. "How long have you been the village leader?" the farmer asked. 4 months. "And how many nights have you slept well?" The young leader looked down. "Very few." The farmer pulled another weed from the soil. "What keeps you awake?" "People." The farmer smiled. "There are many of them." "That is the problem." The young leader had been chosen. Because he was patient, he was educated, he spoke gently, he listened when others interrupted. The villagers believed these qualities would make him fair. At first, he believed the same. Then the requests began. One farmer wanted the river path widened. Another said widening it would destroy useful land. The merchants wanted lower market fees. The elders wanted the money for temple repairs. Parents wanted a new school roof. Fishermen wanted stronger rules against traps in the river. Every request sounded reasonable when the person asking stood before him. Every complaint carried pain. The leader wanted no one to leave feeling ignored, so he promised almost everyone something. Then he discovered that one promise often broke another. He delayed the market fees. The temple repairs stopped. He approved the river path. The landowners became angry. He changed his mind. The farmers accused him of weakness. He announced new fishing rules. Then he softened them after the fishermen protested. Nothing was completed. Everyone remained unhappy. The leader became more careful, then more afraid. Soon, he made no decision unless every group agreed. Every meeting grew longer. Every problem grew larger. He called this patience. The village called it confusion. We recognize this kind of fear. It does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like kindness. Sometimes it looks like fairness. Sometimes it hides behind the words, "I just want everyone to be happy." But no leader, parent, teacher, friend, or human being can create a life where everyone is pleased. Trying to do so does not end conflict. It only moves the conflict inside. The young leader carried every disappointed face home with him. He remembered each complaint. He imagined new ones. Before making a choice, he asked himself who might be upset. There was always someone. So he waited. The farmer asked, "What do you believe compassion means?" Caring about everyone. That is part of it. Listening to them. Yes. Giving people what they need. When possible. The leader frowned. Then what am I doing wrong? The farmer pointed at the field. When the villagers told me not to plant, I listened. You did not obey. No. Then you did not care what they thought. I cared enough to consider whether they were right. The leader remained quiet. The farmer continued. Listening is not the same as surrendering your judgment. Compassion asks us to hear pain clearly. It does not ask us to obey every demand that pain makes. The young man thought of the villagers who entered his room angry. Many did not only want to be heard, they wanted agreement. They wanted their suffering to become the village's only concern. And because the leader feared appearing cold, he treated every strong feeling like a command. The farmer picked up 2 handfuls of soil. One person says this field should hold rice. He raised his left hand. Another says it should hold beans. He raised his right. If I plant both everywhere because I do not want to disappoint either person, what happens? Neither crop grows well. So choosing one is not cruelty. It will still disappoint someone. Yes. The farmer let the soil fall. Compassion without wisdom becomes fear wearing gentle clothes. The words stayed with the leader. He had believed that a good leader should never cause disappointment. Now he began to see that disappointment was not always harm. A child may be disappointed when denied something dangerous. A dishonest trader may be disappointed when asked to repay a debt. A powerful family may be disappointed when the law is applied equally. Their disappointment does not prove the decision is wrong. The farmer said, "Before deciding, ask 3 questions." The leader looked up. Is it true? Is what true? The reason you are acting. The farmer lifted 1 finger. Is it fair? A 2nd finger. And does it reduce harm without creating greater harm? A 3rd. What about whether people approve? The farmer smiled. That is not one of the questions. The leader almost laughed. Then a village boy came running through the field. He was breathing hard. "Leader," he called, "you are needed at the northern bridge." The young man stood quickly. What happened? The bridge is crooked. The farmer looked at the boy. Crooked? Yes, everyone says the carpenter cheated us. The leader's stomach tightened. The northern bridge had been under construction for many weeks. It crossed a narrow but fast part of the river. The village had paid a carpenter from a neighboring town to build it. The leader had approved the work. If the bridge was unsafe, the blame would fall on him. "Who is there?" he asked. "Half the village." Of course. The leader looked at the farmer. "Come with me." The farmer shook his head. This decision is yours. I may need advice. You will have advice. Too much of it." The young man looked toward the road. Fear returned. "What if I choose wrongly?" The farmer said, "Then choose again when truth shows you more." The leader waited. The farmer added, "But do not refuse to choose only because you fear being blamed." They walked together until the field ended. Then the farmer stopped. The leader continued with the boy. At the river, a crowd had gathered. The bridge stretched from one bank to the other. It was strong, it was new, and it curved, not sharply, but enough for everyone to notice. The old bridge had crossed in a straight line. This one bent slightly toward a wide stone in the middle of the river. The villagers pointed at it. "He used less wood. He does not know his work. He is trying to make fools of us." The carpenter stood alone near the entrance. He was a quiet man with thick hands and grey hair. His tools rested on the ground. The leader pushed through the crowd. A merchant stepped forward first. "Make him rebuild it." A fisherman shouted, "Do not let anyone cross." An elder said, "Demand our money back." The carpenter opened his mouth. The crowd became louder. The leader felt the old habit rise. He wanted to calm everyone. He wanted to agree with the loudest people. He wanted to promise the bridge would be destroyed. Then he remembered the farmer. "Listen carefully. Do not obey every demand." The leader raised his hand. The voices slowly stopped. He turned to the carpenter. "Why is the bridge crooked?" The carpenter pointed toward the large stone in the river. "Because the current is strongest on the straight path." A villager laughed. "So you were afraid to build properly?" The carpenter did not react. He said, "The old bridge was straight. That is why the water broke its center support 3 times." The leader looked at the river. The current struck the stone and divided around it. The new bridge curved toward the calmer side. The carpenter continued. "The bend follows the strongest ground beneath the water. It uses more wood, not less." A merchant shouted, "It looks wrong." Several villagers agreed. The leader walked onto the bridge. The crowd called after him, "Be careful. It may fall." The carpenter followed. At the center, the leader looked down. The support stood behind the large stone, protected from the strongest current. He pressed his foot against the boards. Nothing moved. The carpenter showed him the joints. Each one was thick. Each one had been tied and fixed carefully. The leader returned to the bank. Everyone waited. Some wanted punishment. Some wanted reassurance. All wanted him to choose their side. He breathed slowly. Then he said, "No one will use the bridge today." The crowd began speaking again. He raised his hand. "Tomorrow, 2 builders from the southern village will inspect it. If they find it unsafe, it will be rebuilt. If they find it safe, it will remain." The merchant frowned. "You should order it destroyed now." "No," the fisherman said. "Then you do not care about our safety." "I care enough not to decide from anger alone." Another villager shouted, "You are protecting the carpenter." "I am protecting the truth from haste." The words surprised even him. Some people approved, others did not. The leader felt the disagreement around him. It was uncomfortable, but he remained standing. For the first time, he had listened to every voice without becoming owned by any of them. The next day, the builders arrived. They inspected the wood. They tested the supports. They studied the current. At sunset, they gave their answer. "The bridge is safe," one said. "The curve makes it stronger." The villagers looked at the carpenter differently. Some apologized. Some praised him. Some remained suspicious because they did not like being wrong. The carpenter gathered his tools. The leader approached him. "I nearly ordered the bridge destroyed. Many people wanted you to. I wanted them to approve of me." The carpenter looked at the curved bridge. "Straight lines please the eye," he said, "but the river does not care what pleases the eye." The leader understood. Sometimes the right decision looks wrong before its purpose is known. Sometimes a person must stand crooked in the eyes of the crowd to remain true before the river. The bridge was opened the following morning. The first people to cross were several school children. Among them walked a quiet boy wearing a torn robe. He stayed behind the others. He kept pulling the damaged cloth across his chest. The bridge had survived the crowd's judgment. Now the boy would have to survive the eyes he believed were watching him. The bridge had survived the crowd's judgment. Now the carpenter would have to live through the waiting. The villagers stood near the river, staring at the unusual curve. The carpenter gathered his tools slowly. He did not argue. He did not beg them to believe him. He did not walk from person to person, explaining that he was not a fool. He had already shown the leader the supports beneath the bridge. He had already explained the current. There was nothing more to add. Still, the accusations continued. "You should have built it straight. My grandfather built bridges, and none of them looked like this. You wasted our wood. You wanted attention." The carpenter heard every word. Some reached him more deeply than others. He had worked on the bridge for 7 weeks. He had entered the cold river before sunrise. He had carried heavy beams with swollen hands. He had studied the current during rain. He knew why every piece of wood stood where it did. But the villagers saw only the curve. We do this often. We look at the visible shape of a person's choice and judge it without knowing what stands beneath it. We see someone leave a job and call them foolish. We see someone remain silent and call them weak. We see someone choose a different path and think they have lost their way. We judge the bridge. We do not study the river. The carpenter's work was not careless. The old bridge had crossed the river in a straight line. It looked proper. It pleased the eye. But each rainy season, the strongest current struck the center support. Twice the villagers had repaired it. The third time the river carried half of it away. When the carpenter was hired, he spent several days doing nothing that looked like building. He watched the water. He placed sticks into the current and followed where they moved. He walked along both banks. He waited for the river to fall, then studied the stones beneath it. The villagers became impatient. He is wasting time. He should begin cutting wood. He does not know what he is doing. The carpenter did not answer. He had learned long ago that people often praise quick action before they understand careful thought. He found a wide stone near the center of the river. The current struck it and divided. Behind the stone was a calmer place where a support could stand. But reaching it required the bridge to curve. The carpenter drew the shape in the soil. He studied it for a whole afternoon. It was not the shape he would have chosen if beauty were the only concern. But bridges are not built to please people standing safely on the bank. They are built to carry people across water. The leader had ordered an inspection. Until then, the bridge remained closed. The carpenter returned home. His wife saw his face. "They do not trust it," she said. "They do not trust me." "Is the bridge safe?" "Yes." "Then why do you look afraid?" The carpenter placed his tools against the wall. Because truth does not always speak quickly. That evening, he could hear villagers talking outside his house. Some said he should return the payment. Some said he should be forbidden from working again. One man suggested that the carpenter had built the curve because he was too old to measure correctly. The carpenter sat beside a small lamp. His hands rested in his lap. He wanted to go outside. He wanted to explain every joint. He wanted to name every bridge he had built. He wanted to remind them of the floods his work had survived. The need to defend ourselves can feel almost impossible to resist. We believe that if people misunderstand us, we must correct them immediately. We chase every false opinion. We answer every accusation. We spend our peace trying to control a story living inside another person's mind. But the carpenter knew something. People who had decided to mock the bridge would not become engineers because he spoke louder. The truth needed time, so he remained inside. This was not weakness, it was restraint. There are moments when speaking is necessary, there are moments when silence protects dishonesty, but there are also moments when everything true has already been said. More words do not bring more truth. They only reveal our desperation to be approved. The next morning, 2 builders arrived from the southern village. They inspected the supports. They struck the wood with wooden hammers. They checked the ropes and joints. They walked across the bridge carrying heavy stones. The villagers watched from the bank. The carpenter stood at a distance. He could have followed the builders. He could have explained what they were seeing. Instead, he let the work speak. At sunset, the builders gave their judgment. "The bridge is safe," one villager asked. "Even with the curve?" "Because of the curve," one builder replied. "The center support stands behind the stone. The strongest water passes around it." The crowd became quiet. Some villagers looked embarrassed. Others immediately changed their tone. "I knew there must be a reason. I said the carpenter was experienced. The curve is actually beautiful." The carpenter heard the new praise. It felt pleasant. He was human, but he remembered how quickly the same mouths had condemned him. Approval that arrives after success can be warm. It is still unstable. The villagers opened the bridge the next morning. Children were among the first to cross. They were traveling to a small school on the other side of the river. Some ran ahead, others held hands. Near the back walked a quiet boy wearing a torn robe. The cloth had split near one shoulder. His mother had repaired it twice, but the old fabric had opened again. The boy held the torn side closed with one hand. Whenever another child looked toward him, he lowered his eyes. He believed everyone was noticing. He believed every whisper was about him. The carpenter saw him moving slowly. "Does the bridge frighten you?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "What does?" The boy pulled the robe tighter. "Nothing." The carpenter understood that answer. Nothing often means something we are too ashamed to name. Before he could ask again, a deep sound came from upriver. The children stopped. Heavy rain had fallen in the hills during the night. A sudden rush of brown water moved toward them. Branches turned inside it. The teacher shouted, "Cross quickly!" The children began running. The current struck the old stone and divided. One side crashed toward the place where the straight bridge had once stood. The other passed beneath the curved bridge. The supports shook, but they held. A large branch came toward the center. The curve guided it away. The carpenter stepped onto the bridge and helped the younger children across. The boy with the torn robe had frozen. His hand still gripped the cloth at his shoulder. "Come," the carpenter called. The boy looked at the rushing water, then at the other children. His robe tore farther as he began to move. The damaged cloth opened across his side. He stopped again. Several children saw it. The boy's face filled with shame. Even with danger below him, he wanted to hide. The carpenter reached him. "Leave the robe," he said. "Bring the boy." The child looked up. The words entered him. "Leave the robe. Bring the boy." The carpenter took his hand. Together they crossed. Moments later, the water struck the riverbank with full force. The bridge bent slightly beneath the pressure. It did not break. Every child reached the other side. The villagers watched from the bank. No one mocked the curve now. No one called the carpenter careless. The bridge had not become safe because they approved. It had always been safe. Their understanding had simply arrived late. The leader approached the carpenter. "You saved them." "The bridge carried them," he replied. "You built the bridge. I listened to the river." The villagers began praising him. The carpenter accepted their thanks, but he did not become larger inside himself. He knew the same crowd might doubt him again one day. The boy with the torn robe stood nearby. He was trying to cover himself with both hands. The other children had survived the flood. But in his mind, something terrible had still happened. They had seen him. The carpenter removed the cloth covering his own tools and placed it gently around the boy's shoulders. The bridge was called ugly because it did not look like the others, he said. The boy looked at the curved shape behind them. Was it ugly? Some people thought so. But it saved us. The carpenter nodded. A thing does not lose its worth because someone fails to see it. The boy held the cloth around himself. He wanted to believe those words, but shame had followed him for a long time. The bridge had revealed the strength hidden beneath an unusual shape. Now the boy would have to discover that dignity could remain beneath torn cloth. Now the boy would have to discover that dignity could remain beneath torn cloth. He stood near the river with the carpenter's covering around his shoulders. The other children had already begun walking toward school. Some looked back. The boy lowered his head. He knew they had seen the torn robe. He knew they would remember. At least, this was what his mind told him. The carpenter watched him. "Are you going with them?" The boy shook his head. "I will go home." "Why?" "My robe is torn. The school is still open. They will laugh." "Have they laughed?" The boy looked toward the road. "Not yet." "Then you are leaving because of something that has not happened." The boy said nothing. He had been doing this for many weeks. Each morning he dressed for school. Each morning he found a reason not to go. Sometimes the robe was too dirty. Sometimes his sandals were too worn. Sometimes he said his stomach hurt. His mother knew the truth, but she did not have money for new clothes. She washed the robe carefully. She repaired it by lamplight. The cloth had simply become too old to hold the thread. The boy hated that robe. He hated the thin sleeves. He hated the faded color. He hated the careful patches that showed how many times it had torn. But most of all, he hated what he believed the robe told others about him. Poor, unimportant, less than them. We often do this. We take one part of our life and turn it into our whole identity. A worn coat, a small house, a mistake, a weakness, a rejection. Something others may barely notice becomes the loudest truth in our own mind. The boy did not only wear the robe, he carried the meaning he had placed upon it. The carpenter walked him back toward the bridge. Near the entrance, the monk from the distant monastery had stopped to rest. The young monk still carried the sealed message from his teacher. He had crossed many villages since leaving home. He had met the potter, the tea seller, the musician, the widow, the boatman, the farmer, the leader. Now he saw the boy trying to disappear inside a piece of cloth. The carpenter explained what had happened. The monk sat on a low stone. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ananda." "Why are you not at school, Ananda?" The boy pulled the covering tighter. "Everyone has better clothes." "That was not my question." Ananda looked confused. The monk repeated it. "Why are you not at school?" "They will laugh at me." "Will all of them laugh?" "I do not know." "Will some of them?" "Maybe." "Will the robe become whole if you stay home?" "No." "Will you learn anything?" "No." "Then what will staying home give you?" The boy thought. "Safety." The monk looked at him gently. "From what?" "Shame." The monk shook his head. "The shame is already here." The boy felt those words. He had believed school was the place where shame waited. But shame had followed him home. It sat beside him while other children learned. It walked with him to the river. It spoke every time he saw someone dressed better. Avoiding school had not removed it. It had only made his world smaller. The monk asked, "Do you believe a fine robe makes a person good?" "No." "Does a torn robe make someone cruel?" "No." "Then where does dignity come from?" The boy remained quiet. He had heard the word dignity before. Older people spoke of it, teachers used it in lessons, but he had never been sure what it meant. The monk said, "Dignity is how you carry your heart when life does not give you everything you wanted." The boy looked up. "It is how you speak when you are angry, how you treat someone weaker, whether you tell the truth when lying would protect you, whether you keep walking when people misunderstand you." The monk touched the torn edge of the robe. Cloth can cover the body. It cannot create character. The boy looked toward the school path. "What if they laugh? Then you will hear laughter. What if I feel ashamed? Then you will feel shame. What should I do?" Do not let a feeling decide what your life is allowed to become. The monk's words were simple, but they opened something in the boy. He had been waiting to feel confident before returning to school. He had been waiting for the robe to change, for the children to become kinder, for the fear to disappear. But perhaps the road back did not begin after the fear ended. Perhaps it began while the fear was still there. The carpenter gave the boy the cloth covering. "You may wear this today." The boy looked at it. It was rough. It smelled of wood and river water. It was not beautiful. Still, it covered the tear. The boy almost accepted it. Then he stopped. "If I wear it, I will still be hiding." The monk smiled. The boy removed the cloth. He folded it and returned it to the carpenter. The torn robe remained visible. His face burned. His hands shook. He began walking toward school. The monk and carpenter followed at a distance. They did not walk beside him. This mattered. The boy needed support, but he also needed to take the steps himself. When he entered the schoolyard, several children looked at him. One whispered to another. A boy near the well laughed. Ananda felt the shame rise exactly as he had feared. His first thought was to run. Then he remembered the bridge. It had not become strong because everyone liked its shape. It had been strong before they understood it. He kept walking. Inside the classroom, the teacher paused. "You have missed many days." Ananda lowered his eyes. "I was afraid to come." The room became quiet. The teacher noticed the torn robe. She understood. "Sit down," she said, not warmly, not cruelly, simply. The lesson continued. At first, Ananda heard almost nothing. He imagined everyone staring. Then the teacher asked a question about numbers. No one answered. Ananda knew the answer. He raised his hand slowly. The teacher called on him. He spoke. He was correct. For one moment, the robe disappeared from his mind. He was not the poor boy, not the boy with the tear, only a student who knew something. This is how dignity returns, not always through one great victory, sometimes through one honest action, one raised hand, one step into a room we were afraid to enter. At midday, the children went outside. A wealthy student named Vera sat beneath a tree. His clothes were clean. His sandals were new. His writing board was smooth and polished. Everyone admired him. Vera spoke confidently. He often reminded the others that his father owned 3 shops. Teachers expected him to succeed. He expected it too. Ananda sat nearby eating a small piece of bread. Vera was showing the class a difficult sum he had completed. The others gathered around. But Ananda noticed something. One number had been copied incorrectly. The final answer was wrong. He pointed gently. "You may have made a mistake here." Vera's face changed. "No." Ananda looked again. "I think this number should be 6. "It is 8. The teacher wrote 6. Vera glanced toward the others. They were watching. His reputation mattered to him. He was the student who always knew. The student with the best clothes, the student whose father praised him loudly. A mistake did not feel like one small error. It felt like a crack in the person he wanted everyone to see. "You cannot even afford a whole robe," Vera said. Why should I listen to you?" The other children became quiet. Ananda felt the words strike him. This was the moment he had feared. The laughter, the humiliation, the robe being used as proof that he had no worth. He wanted to disappear. Then he remembered what the monk had said. Dignity is how you carry your heart when life does not give you everything you wanted. Ananda looked at Vera. "I may be poor," he said. "The number is still wrong." The teacher heard them. She came over and checked the work. Ananda was correct. Vera looked at the board, then at the watching children. He could admit the mistake or protect the image he had built. He chose the image. "Ananda changed it," he said. The words came quickly, too quickly. The teacher looked at both boys. Ananda stared at Vera. He had expected mockery. He had not expected a lie. Vera's fine robe remained perfect. His polished board still shone. But beneath all that approval, fear had begun to speak. The boy with torn cloth had returned to school, carrying shame honestly. The wealthy student would now have to decide whether reputation mattered more than truth. The wealthy student would now have to decide whether reputation mattered more than truth. Vera stood beneath the tree. The writing board remained between him and Ananda. The other children were watching. The teacher held the board in both hands. One number had been changed. Vera had made the mistake. But he had said Ananda changed it. The lie was small when it left his mouth. Only a few words. Still, it began growing immediately. This is what lies do. They ask for protection, then more protection, then another lie to cover the first. The truth may be painful for one moment. A lie creates many moments that must all be managed. The teacher looked at Ananda. "Did you change this number?" "No." His voice was quiet, but he did not lower his eyes. The torn robe remained visible. So did the hurt on his face. Vera looked at the other students. Some believed him. Why would a wealthy, admired student lie? Why would someone with fine clothes and the highest marks need to cheat? People often confuse appearance with character. They think a polished surface must hide a clean heart, but fear can live beneath expensive cloth. Shame can sit inside a beautiful house, and the need for approval can make even a gifted person afraid of one simple mistake. Vera had not always lied. When he was younger, mistakes were only mistakes. Then his father began praising him before visitors. "My son is never wrong. He is the finest student in the village. One day he will become a great scholar." Vera enjoyed the praise. At first, it made him work harder. Then it became something he feared losing. When he answered correctly, his father smiled. When he failed, his father's face changed. The disappointment lasted only a moment. But Vera remembered it. Soon, he began hiding poor marks. Then, he blamed other students. He told teachers that instructions had been unclear. He claimed his writing board had been damaged. Each lie protected the image everyone admired, but it also made that image more fragile. The more perfect he appeared, the more terrified he became of being seen clearly. We recognize this. Sometimes people praise us for being strong. Then we become afraid to admit we are tired. They praise us for being wise. Then we become afraid to say, "I do not know." They call us dependable. Then we hide our pain because we do not want to disappoint them. Praise becomes a cage when we believe we must remain the person others have praised. The teacher asked Vera, "When did Ananda change the number?" Vera felt the trap close. "Before you came outside." "Why did he do it?" "To embarrass me." Ananda stared at him. The words hurt more than the insult about his robe. He had only tried to help. Now kindness had been turned into wrongdoing. The teacher looked at the other students. Did anyone see Ananda touch the board? No one spoke. Vera waited. He hoped one of his friends would support him. A boy near the well looked away. Another began rubbing dust from his sandals. Approval often gathers around success. It becomes uncertain when truth asks for courage. The teacher said, "Until I know what happened, both of you will remain after class." Ananda's stomach tightened. His mother needed him home before sunset. He had to collect water. He had already missed many lessons. Now, on the first day he returned, he was being punished for something he had not done. The other students whispered. Some looked at his torn robe. Ananda felt shame return. Perhaps coming back had been a mistake. Perhaps people like Vera would always be believed first. During the afternoon lesson, Ananda could not concentrate. He looked toward the door. He imagined leaving and never returning. The monk's words came back. Dignity does not come from cloth. It comes from conduct. But dignity did not make the pain disappear. It only showed him how to carry it. When class ended, the other children left. The teacher sat before the two boys. "Someone is lying," she said. Neither answered. She placed the writing board on the floor. One wrong number is not a great problem. Then she looked at Vira. But a lie that harms another person is. Vira felt heat move across his face. He wanted to confess. The truth was close. Then he imagined the village hearing about it. He imagined his father's silence. He imagined the other students saying that Vera was not perfect after all. So he remained quiet. The teacher asked Ananda to stay. She sent Vera home. Ananda watched him leave. The wealthy boy walked freely down the road. The poor boy remained behind. This is one reason lies are dangerous. They do not only hide the liar, they place the cost upon someone else. Ananda returned home after dark. His mother had carried the water herself. She saw his face. "What happened?" he told her. She looked at the torn robe. Then she looked at him. "Do you want to stop going?" "Yes." "Will that make the lie true?" "No." "Will it make your life better?" He did not answer. His mother sat beside him. "You cannot control what Vera says." She touched his shoulder. "But do not let his fear choose your future." The next morning, Ananda returned to school. This surprised Vera. He had expected the boy to disappear again. Instead, Ananda entered the room and sat in his usual place. He did not accuse Vera. He did not whisper about him. He simply continued learning. That made the lie heavier. Vera had believed the problem would end if Ananda stayed away. But truth has a way of remaining present. It does not always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly across the room. For 3 days, Vera protected his reputation. For 3 nights, he slept badly. He began hearing accusation in ordinary sounds. A knock at the door made him think the teacher had come. His father's questions felt dangerous. When children laughed in the street, he imagined they knew. This is the hidden cost of appearing perfect. We must always guard the image. We become servants to the version of ourselves we created. On the 4th day, the teacher announced that Ananda would miss the school journey because he had been accused of damaging another student's work. The journey was to the monastery library. Ananda had waited for it all year. He lowered his head. Vera felt something break inside him. The lie was no longer protecting him from embarrassment. It was taking something real from another person. After class, he walked home slowly. His father was speaking with visitors outside their house. "There is my son," he said proudly, "the boy who is never wrong." The visitors smiled. Vera stopped. The praise he once loved now felt unbearable. Never wrong. The words had become a wall. For the first time, he saw that everyone's admiration was built around someone who did not exist. He entered the house and stood, alone. Then he understood something. If he confessed, people might think less of him. If he remained silent, he would think less of himself. The next morning, Vera arrived before the other students. The teacher was sweeping the classroom. He stood near the doorway. "I changed the number," he said. The teacher stopped sweeping. "And Ananda?" "He did nothing." Vera's voice shook. "I lied because I did not want the others to know I was wrong." The teacher looked at him for a long time. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because he will miss the journey." "And if there were no journey?" Vera could not answer. The teacher placed the broom aside. "Confession does not remove the harm. I know. But it stops the harm from growing." Vera began to cry, not loudly. The tears came from a place he had protected for years. "I do not know how to be wrong." The teacher's face softened. "No one is asking you to enjoy being wrong." She said, "You must only stop pretending that you never are." When Ananda arrived, Vera confessed again. He expected anger. He expected Ananda to insult him. The boy only asked, "Why did you blame me?" "Because I thought people would believe you before they believed me." Ananda looked at his torn robe. "They did not." Vera lowered his head. "I know." Ananda did not forgive him immediately. This mattered. Truth does not force another person to heal on our schedule. Vera had done what was right. Ananda still had the right to feel hurt. The teacher allowed Ananda to join the school journey. Vera was given another task. For 1 month, he would help the monastery gardener after class. The gardener was known throughout the village for creating perfect shapes. Every bush was round. Every tree stood at the same height. Every branch that grew differently was cut away. On the first afternoon, Vera entered the garden. Rows of identical trees stood before him. The gardener handed him a pair of shears. "That one is growing unevenly," he said. Vera looked at the tree. One branch reached toward the sunlight. It was healthy. It was green, but it did not match the others. "Cut it," the gardener said. Vera raised the shears. He had spent years cutting away every mistake that made him look different from the perfect image others admired. Now he stood before a garden where nothing was allowed to grow as itself, and the next lesson waited inside the sound of branches being cut, and the next lesson waited inside the sound of branches being cut. Vera stood in the monastery garden with the shears in his hands. Before him was a young tree with one branch reaching toward the sunlight. The branch was strong. Its leaves were green. Nothing was wrong with it. It was only different. The gardener pointed again. "Cut it." Vera looked at the other trees. Everyone had been shaped into the same round form. No branch stood too high. No root was allowed to show. No tree leaned toward the river. From a distance, the garden looked orderly. Perfect, some people said, but standing inside it felt strange. It did not feel like a place where things were growing. It felt like a place where growth was being controlled. Vera placed the shears around the branch. "Why must it be cut?" he asked. "Because it ruins the line." "What line?" The gardener moved his hand across the row. "All the trees must match." "Why?" The gardener looked surprised. "So visitors will admire the garden." Vera understood this. He had spent years trying to make every part of himself match what others expected. The best student, the wealthiest boy, the one who was never wrong. Whenever something in him grew outside that shape, fear cut it away. A doubt, a mistake, a question, an apology. Anything that might make him look less perfect had been hidden. Now he stood before a tree suffering from the same demand. The gardener took the shears from him. "You hesitate too much." He cut the branch. It fell to the ground. The tree remained neat. The gardener smiled. "Better." Vera looked at the fallen leaves. The branch had been alive a moment earlier. Now it lay in the dust because it had reached in the wrong direction. We often do this to ourselves. We cut away honest parts of who we are because they do not fit the shape people praise. We hide gentleness because others admire strength. We hide uncertainty because others expect confidence. We hide sorrow because people are more comfortable with our smile. Then they praise the shape, and we wonder why we feel less alive inside it. The gardener had served the monastery for many years. He took great pride in the garden. Visitors stopped at the entrance. They admired the even rows. They praised the circles, squares, and smooth edges. The gardener remembered every compliment. He repeated them when no visitors were present. A nobleman once said this was the finest garden in the region. A merchant said no branch was out of place. A monk from the northern mountains said he had never seen such order. The gardener believed praise proved the garden was healthy. But health and appearance are not always the same. Beyond the monastery walls stood a wild grove. The trees there leaned in different directions. Some grew tall, some remained small. Their roots twisted through stones. Birds built nests wherever they could. No one shaped them, no one praised them. The gardener disliked the grove. "It looks neglected," he said. Vera walked there during a break. The ground was uneven. Fallen leaves remained where they landed. One tree had grown around a large rock instead of standing straight. Another had lost half its branches during an old storm. Still, new leaves grew from its side. The wild grove was not perfect. It was alive. Vera began noticing something else. The shaped trees in the garden had thin trunks. The gardener had trimmed them so often that many had grown upward without growing strong. Their roots were shallow because the soil around them was kept soft and clean. The wild trees were different. They had pushed through hard ground. They had bent under wind. They had grown around one another. Their strange shapes told the story of what they had survived. One afternoon, Vera asked, "Should we not let some branches remain?" The gardener frowned. "Then what would people say? They may say the trees look natural. They will say, I have become lazy. Would that make the trees unhealthy?" The gardener did not answer. This was the question beneath all his work. He did not only want a beautiful garden, he wanted people to think he was a good gardener. The trees had become proof of his worth. Every uneven branch felt like a public failure, so he trimmed them again and again. The gardener was not cruel, he was afraid. Many controlling people are. They fear what will happen if life is allowed to grow beyond their plans. The sky changed near sunset. Clouds gathered over the western hills. The monastery bell rang early. A monk walked through the garden, warning everyone to secure doors and bring loose objects inside. A strong storm is coming. The gardener looked at his trees. They will be fine. Vera looked toward the wild grove. The wind had already begun moving through it. Branches bent, leaves turned upward. Birds disappeared into deeper shelter. The shaped garden remained still for a moment. Then the first gust arrived. It struck the rows from the west. The round trees shook. Their carefully balanced tops caught the wind like wide bowls. One young tree bent sharply. The gardener ran toward it. "Bring rope!" Vera carried a coil from the tool shed. Together, they tied the tree to a post. Before they finished, another gust came. Rain followed. It fell hard and sideways. The gardener moved from tree to tree. He tried to support them. He tied branches. He pressed soil around shallow roots. He shouted instructions that the wind carried away. Then the storm became stronger. One shaped tree broke near the middle. The gardener cried out. Another pulled from the ground completely. Its roots were smaller than Vera expected. The perfect shape above had hidden weakness below. The storm did not care how often visitors had praised the garden. It did not care that every tree matched. It asked only one question. "Can you bend?" The wild grove answered. Its trees moved with the wind. Some branches broke, some leaves tore away, but the trunks leaned, their roots held tightly around stones and deep earth. The same irregular shapes the gardener disliked helped them survive. A tree growing beside another took part of its force. A low branch caught a falling limb before it struck the ground. Nothing matched. Everything supported something else. Vera stood beneath the monastery roof and watched. He thought about his lie. He had wanted to appear like the perfect trees. No mistakes, no weakness, no uneven branch. But the first strong pressure had nearly broken him. Confessing had felt like losing the shape everyone admired. Now he understood that it had allowed him to bend instead of fall. The storm continued through the night. By morning, the garden was almost unrecognizable. Several trees lay across the paths. Branches covered the ground. The neat rows had disappeared. The gardener walked slowly among them. His face looked empty. "Years," he said. "I spent years making them perfect." Vera looked toward the wild grove. Most of it remained standing. The gardener saw it too. For the first time, he did not call it ugly. He walked to one fallen tree and touched its broken trunk. "I cut away too much." Vera said nothing. The gardener had not only removed branches, he had removed. The trees chanced to become strong in their own way. The monks and villagers came to clear the paths. They lifted branches. They carried broken wood into piles. Near the far wall, Vera heard a low sound beneath a fallen tree. He stopped. "Did you hear that?" The gardener listened. A voice came again. Weak. "Help!" They pushed aside wet leaves and found a man trapped beneath several branches. His robe was torn. Blood marked one side of his face. A leather message case remained tied across his chest. Vera called the monks. Together they lifted the branches and pulled the man free. He was alive, barely. Inside the message case was a sealed invitation bearing the royal mark. The injured man opened his eyes. "I am a messenger from the king," he whispered. The gardener stared at the seal. The messenger had been traveling toward the monastery when the storm caught him. He had taken shelter near the garden wall. A shaped tree had fallen. The wild branches beside it had prevented the trunk from crushing him completely. What the gardener had called disorder had saved a life. The monks carried the messenger inside. Before losing consciousness again, he placed the invitation into the abbot's hands. "The royal court requests a teacher," he said, "a matter of great importance." The gardener looked at the broken garden. For years he had believed perfection would bring important visitors. Now the king's invitation had arrived among fallen branches, not because the garden looked perfect, because something wild had been strong enough to protect the person carrying it. The message would soon travel to the palace, and at the royal court another man was living among perfect appearances, a king who had learned to wear a different face for every person. The garden had lost its identical shapes. The next story would begin with a ruler who no longer knew which shape was truly his own. The message would soon travel to the palace, but first the messenger had to decide whether fear would change what he carried. He rested inside the monastery for 3 days. The fallen branches had injured his shoulder. A deep cut crossed one side of his face. The monks cleaned the wound. The gardener brought him warm water. Vera sat nearby and watched. The royal invitation remained beside the messenger's bed. So did another sealed paper. This second message was smaller. The messenger checked it often, more often than the royal invitation. The young monk noticed. "What is that letter?" he asked. The messenger looked toward the door. Then he lowered his voice. "It is the real reason I was sent." The monk waited. The messenger touched the seal. The king asked the monastery to send a teacher to the palace. That is what the invitation says. Yes, but... The messenger looked troubled. The northern villages are refusing the new grain tax. Why? The harvest failed. The monk said nothing. The messenger continued. Several officials told the king that the villagers were lazy and hiding grain, but I passed through those villages. What did you see? Empty storage jars. Anything else? Children eating once a day. The messenger's voice weakened. An old woman offered me water. There was no food in her house. The monk looked at the smaller letter. And you wrote this? The messenger nodded. It explains what I saw. It says the tax should be delayed. Then give it to the king. The messenger looked frightened. You do not understand. What do I not understand? The king dislikes being corrected. The gardener, standing near the window, lowered his eyes. Everyone had heard stories about the palace. Officials praised every decision. Visitors bowed deeply. Advisors spoke carefully. No one knew how much of the king's anger was real and how much had grown through rumor. But fear does not need proof to become powerful. The messenger said, "If I tell him the officials lied, he may punish them. Perhaps. He may punish me. Perhaps. He may say I am questioning his judgment." The monk looked at him. "Are you?" The messenger hesitated. "I am telling him what I saw. That was not my question." The messenger breathed slowly. "Yes, I believe the tax is wrong." The room became quiet. Speaking clearly before a monk was easy. Speaking the same words before a king felt different. This is how power tests truth, not by changing the facts, by changing the cost of saying them. The messenger had served the palace for 11 years. He knew how words moved inside royal halls. Bad news became softer as it climbed upward. A failed harvest became a small delay. A hungry village became a difficult district. A cruel order became a firm decision. By the time truth reached the king, it often wore fine clothes and no longer looked like itself. The messenger had done this, too, not with great lies, with small changes. He removed words that sounded too harsh. He added respectful phrases. He waited for better moods. He told himself this was wisdom. Sometimes it was, but sometimes fear had been editing the truth. We recognize this. We speak one way to the weak and another to the powerful. We tell a friend the truth but flatter someone who can reward us. We hide what matters because we fear losing a place, a name, a relationship, or someone's approval. Then we say we were being careful. Care is not the same as dishonesty. But fear often borrows the language of care. The monk asked, "If a poor farmer asked what you saw in the northern villages, what would you say?" "That people are hungry." "And if the king asks?" The messenger looked down. "I would say the harvest has created some difficulty." The monk nodded. "There it is." "What?" "The truth changing clothes." The messenger frowned. "I must show respect. Respect does not require making suffering smaller." "You have never stood before the king." "No." "Then you do not know what it is like." The monk accepted this. "That is true." The messenger looked surprised. He had expected an argument. The monk continued, "I do not know your fear in the body, but I know this. A truth that becomes false near power was never being protected. It was being abandoned." The messenger turned away. The words felt severe. He was still wounded, still tired, still carrying years of caution. The monk softened his voice. "You do not need to speak without fear. Then how should I speak?" "With fear, if fear is what is there." The messenger looked back. "Let your voice shake. Let your hands tremble. But do not change what you saw." The gardener understood. During the storm he had seen what happened when life was shaped only to please the eye. The trees had lost the strength to bend. Truth can be trimmed the same way. Each careful cut makes it more acceptable, more beautiful, less alive. The messenger remained at the monastery until he could travel. During that time, he rewrote the letter 3 times. The first version was gentle, too gentle. It said the villages were experiencing discomfort. He tore it. The second said the tax may require reconsideration. He tore that one too. The third said the harvest has failed. The villagers do not have enough grain to feed their children. Officials who say otherwise are not telling the truth. Collecting the tax now will increase suffering. The messenger read it aloud. His voice shook. The monk said, "That sounds like what you saw." "It may end my service." "Yes." "Do you always answer like this?" "No. Sometimes I say less." The messenger almost smiled. They left for the palace the next morning. The young monk carried the royal invitation. The messenger carried the smaller letter close to his chest. Vera and the gardener watched them go. The road climbed out of the village and followed the river south. As they walked, the messenger practiced. "Your Majesty, I humbly report some difficulty." He stopped. "No." He tried again. "Your Majesty, there may be false information from the north." He stopped again. The monk said, "You are still walking around the truth." "I am trying not to sound disrespectful." "Then be respectful." "How?" "Bow. Speak calmly. Do not insult. Do not exaggerate. But say what is true." The messenger nodded. "This distinction matters. Honesty does not require cruelty. Truth does not become stronger when delivered with pride. The Buddhist path does not teach us to use honesty as a weapon. It teaches right speech, true, useful, timely, and spoken with a mind that does not wish to harm. The messenger could tell the king the truth without humiliating him. He could report falsehood without becoming hateful. He could be firm without becoming hard. Near sunset on the second day, they saw the palace walls. The messenger slowed. His breathing changed. The young monk noticed. "Fear? Yes." "Where?" "My chest." "Anything else?" "My mouth is dry." "Then fear has arrived." The messenger stopped. "What should I do?" "Walk with it." They continued. At the palace gate, guards inspected the royal seal. The messenger and monk were led through wide courtyards. Servants moved quietly. Officials stood in small groups. Every robe was clean. Every wall was polished. Everything looked controlled. The messenger felt smaller with each step. A palace official approached. "The king is meeting with his advisors." The messenger bowed. "We carry an invitation and a report." "What report?" "The northern grain tax." The official's face changed. "Has the trouble ended?" "No." The official lowered his voice. "Do not say trouble." "What should I say?" "Delay." The messenger looked at the monk. The monk said nothing. The choice belonged to him. The official continued. "The king has had a difficult morning. Present the invitation today. Give the report another time." "When?" "When he is in a better mood." The messenger knew what this meant. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps next week, perhaps never. A servant led them into the royal hall. The king sat on a raised seat. Officials stood on both sides. The messenger bowed deeply. The young monk placed the monastery invitation before him. The king opened it. "You were delayed." "There was a storm, Your Majesty." "Were you careless?" The messenger felt the first cut of fear. "No, Your Majesty." The king looked at the wound on his face, then at the paper in his hand. "Has the monastery agreed to send a teacher?" "They are considering your request." The king frowned. "Considering?" The official shifted slightly. The messenger saw it. Every face watching the king, every person adjusting to his mood. The king looked around the hall. "No one seems pleased today." An advisor smiled immediately. "We are always pleased in your presence." The king stared at him. The smile weakened. The messenger suddenly saw something he had never expected. The king was searching faces too, just as the young monk once had, just as the boatman had, just as Vera had. The ruler of the kingdom was watching every expression. A whisper between officials made him tense. A slow bow seemed to offend him. A moment of silence made him suspicious. He did not only demand approval, he needed it. Power had not freed him from public opinion. It had surrounded him with more of it. The king turned back to the messenger. "You said there was another report." The messenger's hands trembled. The official near the door gave a small warning look. The messenger felt the letter against his chest. He remembered the northern villages, the empty jars, the old woman with no food. He bowed again. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Speak." The messenger opened the letter. His mouth was dry. His heart struck hard against his ribs. "The harvest has failed." The hall became still. The northern villages do not have enough grain to feed their children. One official moved as though to interrupt. The messenger continued. "Some reports given to you are false." The king's face hardened. The messenger nearly softened the next words. Then he remembered. "Do not change what you saw. Collecting the tax now will increase suffering." Silence filled the hall. The messenger waited for anger. The king looked at the officials, then at the monk, then back at the messenger. "Do you believe I made a cruel decision?" There it was, the question beneath the question. Not only is the tax wrong, but what do you think of me? The messenger understood that the king was not simply defending a policy. He was defending an image, a wise ruler, a strong ruler, a ruler who could not be wrong. The same prison Vera had lived inside. The messenger bowed lower. "I believe you were given false information." "That is not what I asked." The king's voice was quiet, more dangerous than shouting. The messenger's fear rose. He let it rise. Then he said, "I believe the decision is causing harm." Several officials looked at the floor. The king's face changed. For one moment he looked less like a ruler, more like a man who had heard the one thing everyone was afraid to tell him. He dismissed the court. Everyone left except the messenger and the monk. The king stepped down from the raised seat, his shoulders lowered. "Do they all think I am cruel?" he asked. The question came softly. The messenger did not know how to answer. The monk did. "I think you do not know what they think." The king looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because they are afraid to show you." The king turned toward the empty hall. All his life people had bowed, praised, agreed, but he had never known whether any of it was real. The messenger had feared the king's disapproval. The king had been living in fear of everyone else's, and behind the many faces he wore for his court, the next story was already waiting. And behind the many faces he wore for his court, the next story was already waiting. The king stood in the empty hall. The messenger had spoken the truth. The monk had spoken something harder. The king did not know what anyone truly thought of him. For years he had believed approval surrounded him. Now he began to wonder whether fear had been wearing the face of respect. He dismissed the messenger gently. Then he asked the monk to remain. "Do you think I am false?" the king asked. The monk looked at him. "I think you are tired." The answer surprised him. The king had expected judgment. Instead, he received recognition. He was tired. Tired in a way sleep did not repair. Tired of watching every face. Tired of entering each room and becoming the person that room expected. With soldiers, he made his voice hard. He stood straight. He spoke of courage, discipline, and victory. He never admitted uncertainty. A king who doubted himself, he believed, would lose the army's respect. With merchants, he became friendly. He laughed loudly. He praised trade. He promised roads, protection, and lower taxes. A king who seemed distant, he believed, would lose their support. With nobles, he became proud. He spoke of bloodlines, honor, and tradition. He hid every ordinary part of himself. He feared they would think him unworthy of the throne. With monks, he lowered his voice. He spoke slowly. He used words about compassion and peace. He tried to appear less attached than he truly was. He believed holy people would judge him for loving power. Each face had begun as a small adjustment, a way to make others comfortable, a way to be understood. But slowly the faces became masks, and the king no longer knew what remained beneath them. We recognize this. We speak differently at work than we do at home. We become strong around people who depend on us, funny around people who expect joy, quiet around people who dislike conflict, wise around people we want to impress. Some of this is natural. Kindness adjusts. Wisdom notices the room. But there is a difference between choosing how to speak and losing ourselves in the choice. The king had crossed that line long ago. He did not change his manner to serve the moment. He changed himself to avoid disapproval. The monk asked, "Who are you when no one is watching?" The king looked toward the tall doors. "I am always being watched." "At night?" "Servants remain nearby." "When you are alone in your room?" "I think about what people said during the day." The monk waited. The king understood. Even alone, the crowd remained inside him. He had built a court in his own mind, nobles judging, soldiers questioning, merchants calculating, monks observing. Every decision passed before them. Every thought waited for permission. The king sat on the lowest step beneath the throne. "I do not know how to stop." The monk said, "Then begin with one day." "One day of what?" "Do not ask anyone to praise you." The king almost laughed. "I do not ask for praise." The monk looked toward the empty hall. The king remembered the advisor who smiled too quickly, the questions he often asked. Was the speech strong? Did the soldiers seem inspired? Did the merchants appear satisfied? What are people saying about me? He rarely used the word praise. The hunger was still there. The monk continued, "Do not perform goodness so it will be seen. Do not change an honest answer because someone powerful may dislike it. Do not ask whether people approve. Listen, act carefully, then let their opinion belong to them." The king frowned. "That sounds simple." "It is simple." "Then why does it feel impossible?" "Because simple things can still touch deep attachments." The king agreed to try. But before the day began, a visiting nun arrived at the palace. She was old. Her robe had been repaired many times. She walked without hurry. The monastery had sent her after receiving the king's invitation. She entered the hall carrying no gift. She bowed, not too deeply, not carelessly. The king studied her face. He could not tell what she thought of him. This made him uncomfortable. "You were sent to advise me?" he asked. "I was sent because you asked for a teacher." "Do you believe I need one?" "Everyone who suffers needs teaching." The officials looked toward the king. They waited to see whether he would be offended. The king felt the familiar pressure. He wanted to appear humble before the nun. He wanted the officials to admire his patience. He almost smiled in a way he had practiced for religious visitors. Then he remembered the monk's instruction: no performance. He allowed his face to remain as it was. "Yes," he said, "I suffer." The room became very quiet. The king had never spoken those words before the court. He felt exposed, then strangely lighter. The nun asked everyone else to leave. When they were alone, she said, "The monk told me about your one-day practice. Do you think it will help? You have already asked for approval." The king stopped. She had caught him immediately. "I asked for your opinion." "No, you asked me to make you feel safe." The king looked away. This was going to be a difficult day. The nun said, "Today you will not wear the royal crown." "Why?" "Because people praise crowns. They should respect the office. Respect and praise are not the same. The king removed it. Without the crown, his head felt strangely light. He wore a plain robe and followed the nun through the palace. Their first stop was the kitchen. The workers froze. When he entered, several bowed so quickly that one dropped a bowl. The king almost said, "Do not be afraid. I am a generous ruler." He wanted them to know he was kind. The nun glanced at him. He remained silent. A cook brought him bread. The king tasted it. Everyone waited. Usually he would praise it loudly if nobles were present, or complain if he wanted to appear strict. Today he simply said, "Thank you." The cook looked confused. No grand approval, no anger, only an honest response. They went to the training yard. The soldiers straightened. The commander asked whether the king was pleased with their work. The king felt the old role rising. He wanted to give a strong speech. Instead he asked, "What do you need?" The commander hesitated. "New shields." "Why was I not told?" The man looked at the ground. "Your officers feared the request would sound like weakness." The king felt shame. His need to appear strong had taught others to hide their needs. He ordered the shields. Then he moved on. At the market gate, merchants gathered around him. They praised his wisdom. They praised the roads. They praised the peace of the kingdom. The king felt warmth, then suspicion. Were they sincere? Were they hoping for lower fees? The nun saw him searching their faces. "Let the words arrive," she said quietly. "Do not build your home inside them." The king thanked the merchants and continued. By midday he felt exhausted. Without his usual masks, every meeting felt uncertain. He could no longer control how others saw him. Some thought he was serious. Some thought he was troubled. Some thought he was becoming weak. The king heard whispers. He did not correct them. This was the practice, not to create the perfect impression, to remain honest while impressions formed around him. The nun led him toward the lower part of the palace. They passed storage rooms, servants' quarters, then iron doors. "The prison?" the king asked. "Yes." "Why?" "You have spent the morning among people who want something from you." "And prisoners do not?" "Some want freedom." She looked at him. "But one man inside believes there is nothing left to ask for." They entered. The air was cool and damp. A guard carried a lamp. Most prisoners rose when they saw the king. Some begged, some protested their innocence, some praised his mercy before he had shown any. At the final cell, one man remained seated. His hair was grey, his clothes were worn, his hands rested quietly on his knees. The guard said, "That is Danta." "What did he do?" the king asked. "He killed a merchant during a robbery many years ago." The king looked at the prisoner. Danta did not bow. The guard became angry. "Show respect." The king raised his hand. Today was not a day for demanding signs of approval. He moved closer to the bars. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "Why do you not bow?" Danta looked at him. "Would it change what I did?" The king had no answer. The prisoner had been hated for 18 years. Villagers cursed his name. The merchant's family wished him dead. Guards spoke to him as though he were less than human. At first, Danta fought them. Then he believed them. He stopped using his own name. He called himself what others called him: murderer, animal, worthless man. The nun sat on the floor outside the cell. "What do you believe you are?" she asked. Danta laughed without joy. "You already heard." "I heard what others call you." "That is what I am." "You committed a terrible act." "Yes." "Is that the only act in your whole life?" "It is the only one anyone remembers." The king felt those words. He had spent his life trying to be remembered only for good things. This prisoner had been reduced to the worst thing he had ever done. Both were trapped inside public opinion. One chased praise, the other surrendered to hatred. The nun said, Remorse can guide a person. Shame can bury him. Dante looked at her. What is the difference? Remorse says, I caused harm and I must face it. Shame says, I am nothing except the harm. The prisoner's face changed. For years, hatred had seemed like justice. He had never considered that accepting everyone's hatred might also be a way of avoiding change. If he was only a monster, then there was nothing left to practice, nothing left to repair, no reason to become different. The king stood before the cell without a crown, without the face of a powerful ruler, without the need to appear merciful. He looked at Dante as one frightened man looking at another. The prisoner had believed the crowd's hatred. The king had depended on the crowd's praise. And the nun understood that both men were about to learn the same lesson from opposite sides of the bars. The prisoner had believed the crowd's hatred. The king had depended on the crowd's praise. And the nun understood that both men were trapped by voices outside themselves. Dante sat inside the cell. The iron bars crossed his face. For 18 years, people had called him worthless, murderer, animal, a man beyond repair. At first, he fought those words. He shouted back. He blamed hunger. He blamed bad company. He blamed the merchant for resisting. He blamed the guards for cruelty. But the years passed. His anger became tired. Slowly, he stopped defending himself. Then something worse happened. He began agreeing. When the guards called him an animal, he lowered his head. When visitors stared at him with disgust, he believed their faces. When the merchant's family said no good remained in him, he accepted it as truth. We recognize this in smaller ways. Someone calls us selfish, and the word follows us. Someone says we are weak, foolish, difficult, or impossible to love. If we hear it long enough, we stop asking whether it is true. We begin living as though the judgment is our name. Dante had done something terrible. A man had died because of him. Nothing the nun said would erase that. Buddhism does not teach us to escape responsibility. It teaches us to see clearly. Clear seeing includes the harm we caused. It also includes the possibility that a human being is larger than one act. The nun sat outside the cell. What happened that night? She asked. Dante looked toward the king. You already know. I know what the court recorded. That is enough. For punishment, perhaps. She leaned closer, but not for understanding. Dante remained silent for a long time. Then he began. He had been 26. His wife had died during childbirth. The baby survived only a few weeks. After that, Dante stopped caring what happened to him. He drank. He borrowed money. He joined men who robbed travelers outside the market. One night, they followed a merchant carrying silver. They expected him to surrender the bag. He fought back. Dante struck him with a wooden club. Once. The merchant fell. The others ran. Dante remained. He watched the merchant stop breathing. The whole world became quiet. He could have fled. Instead, he sat beside the body until guards arrived. I killed him, Dante said. Yes, the nun replied. I destroyed his family. You caused them great suffering. I do not deserve peace. The nun looked at him carefully. Who told you remorse must feel like endless self-hatred? Dante frowned. Should I forgive myself? That is not what I asked. What else is there? The nun placed her hands in her lap. There is responsibility. There is practice. There is becoming someone who would not make the same choice again. Dante laughed bitterly. What good does that do the dead? It does not return him. Then it is useless. No, her voice remained calm. It protects the living from the person you once were. The king listened. Dante looked toward the floor. For years he had treated suffering as payment. He believed that hating himself honored the man he killed. But his self-hatred had not fed the merchant's children. It had not comforted the widow. It had not repaired anything. It had only frozen Dante inside the worst night of his life. This is one of shame's hidden tricks. It feels like responsibility, but shame often keeps us turned inward. My failure, my ugliness, my worthlessness. Remorse looks outward. Who was harmed? What can still be repaired? How can I live so the harm is not repeated? The nun said, "Your guilt can become a teacher." Dante looked at her. But a teacher is meant to lead you somewhere. If it only keeps you kneeling forever, you are no longer learning. The king asked, "Do you regret what you did?" Dante looked at him sharply. "Every day." "What have you done with that regret?" The prisoner pointed at the walls. "What could I do here?" The guard near the door shifted. He knew the answer was not entirely true. Dante had been given work many times. He could have helped repair baskets. He could have taught younger prisoners to read. He could have written to the merchant's family. He refused every task. Why? Because uselessness had become safe. If he tried to do good, someone might reject it. Someone might say it could never be enough. So he did nothing. Then no one could tell him his effort had failed. We sometimes remain broken because healing creates a new risk. The risk of hope. The risk of trying, the risk that others may still refuse to see us differently. Dante said, "They would never accept anything from me." "Perhaps not," the nun replied. "Then why try?" "Because their approval is not the measure of whether the act is right." The same lesson had crossed the palace. The messenger told the truth without knowing whether the king would approve. The king practiced honesty, without controlling what the court thought. Now, Dante had to practice change without demanding that the world forgive him. The king returned to the palace that evening. He reviewed Dante's sentence. The prisoner had served 18 years. He had no remaining family. The law allowed release if the king believed he was no longer dangerous. But the king did not want to appear weak. He imagined what the merchant's family would say, what the nobles would say, what the city would say. Then he noticed the old mask returning. He was not deciding only from justice, he was deciding from fear of public opinion. The next morning he returned to the prison. Dante stood this time. The king said, "Your release has been approved." Dante stared at him. "Why?" "Because your sentence is complete. Will the merchant's family agree? Probably not. Will the city? Some will not." Dante looked confused. He had believed freedom would arrive only after everyone decided he deserved it. That day would never come. The cell opened. Dante stepped outside. He expected to feel joy. Instead, he felt terror. The walls had hated him, but they had also told him who he was. Outside, he would have to choose. The nun waited near the gate. "Where will I go?" he asked. "With me for a time." "Why?" "Because a mountain village needs help." "What can I do?" "Carry supplies." Dante almost said no. The work sounded too ordinary. He had imagined that changing required some great act, but most change begins with small, useful things. A basket lifted, a path cleared, a frightened person treated gently. They left the city on foot. The king watched from the gate. Some guards whispered. One spat near Dante's path. Dante heard it. The old shame rose. The nun did not tell him to ignore it. She only kept walking. After several days, they reached a mountain village surrounded by pine trees. The air was cold. A small healing house stood near the center. People waited outside. Inside, a woman moved between beds. Her face was pale with exhaustion. Her hands trembled as she prepared herbs. This was Mira, the village healer. For many years, people had trusted her. She had treated fevers, set broken bones, delivered children, stayed beside the dying when nothing more could be done. Then one patient died during the winter, a young father. The village had expected her to save him. When she could not, grief became blame. Some called her careless. Some said she had lost her gift. Some refused her medicine. Mira heard the words. Then she began believing them. Now every decision frightened her. Every cough sounded like the beginning of another failure. Every patient's face asked a question she could not answer. "Will you save me?" Dante placed the supplies near the door. He saw the healer staring at her own hands. He knew that look. The look of someone who had allowed the crowd to become the final judge of who they were. He had carried that judgment for 18 years. Now he had arrived in time to see it taking hold of someone else. He had carried that judgment for 18 years. Now he had arrived in time to see it taking hold of someone else. Mira stood beside a narrow bed. A child lay beneath a wool blanket. His face was hot with fever. His mother sat nearby, watching every movement the healer made. Mira reached for a bowl of water. Her hand shook. The mother noticed. "Are you certain this will help?" Mira stopped. Before the young father died, she would have answered calmly. She would have checked the child's breathing. She would have cooled his skin. She would have prepared the herbs she had used many times before. Now every question felt like an accusation. "No," she said. The mother's face changed. "You are not certain." Mira looked toward the door. Several villagers stood outside. They were listening. "I mean, no healer can promise what will happen." "That is not what you used to say." Mira lowered her eyes. The mother pulled the child closer. "Perhaps I should take him elsewhere." There was no other healer nearby. The nearest one lived 2 days down the mountain. Still, fear made the impossible sound safer. Mira stepped back. "Perhaps you should." Dante watched from the corner. The child needed care. The mother needed calm. But Mira was no longer treating only the fever. She was treating the whole village's opinion of her, and that illness had entered her hands. We recognize this. After one failure, we begin doubting everything we once knew. One relationship ends, and we believe we cannot love wisely. One business fails, and we believe we should never try again. One person rejects us, and suddenly every good thing others saw becomes false. Pain takes one result and turns it into a final judgment. Mira had served the village for 23 years. She had delivered more than 60 children. She had treated infected wounds. She had stayed awake through winter nights beside people who were afraid. Many villagers were alive because of her care. But no one spoke about those nights now. They spoke about Arun, the young father who died. He had become sick during the coldest week of winter. At first, it looked like an ordinary fever. Then his breathing became difficult. Mira prepared medicine. She warmed the room. She sent for help from the valley. Snow blocked the road. For 3 nights, she remained beside him. On the 4th morning, Arun died. His wife screamed. His children waited outside the room. His father stood near the door and stared at Mira. "You said you would help him." "I tried." "You said the medicine was strong." "It was." "Then why is he dead?" Mira had no answer that could satisfy grief. Some suffering does not want an explanation. It wants the world to become different. When the world refuses, anger looks for a person to blame. Arun's father found Mira. He told everyone she had waited too long. He said she had chosen the wrong herbs. He said a better healer would have saved his son. The village listened. Many were grieving too. Blame gave their grief a direction. Soon, people who had once thanked Mira began questioning her. A woman whose life she had saved said perhaps Mira had only been lucky. A man whose broken leg she had set said her hands were becoming weak. Parents stopped bringing their children early. They waited until sickness became worse. Then they blamed her for not doing enough. Mira began believing them. That is how approval controls us. Praise tells us we are good. Blame tells us we are worthless. If we build our identity on one, the other can destroy it. Dante walked toward the feverish child. He touched the side of the water bowl. Is the water too warm? Mira looked at him. No. Will it help cool him? Yes. Then why are you standing there? She stiffened. You are not a healer. No. You do not understand what happened. No. Dante met her eyes. But I understand what happens when everyone tells you that one terrible event is the whole truth about you. Mira looked away. The nun stood near the doorway. She said nothing. This moment belonged to them. Dante continued. I killed a man. The mother beside the child looked frightened. Dante did not hide. I caused harm that cannot be undone. He looked at Mira. But you did not kill that patient. He died under my care. That is not the same. What if I chose wrongly? Did you ignore him? No. Did you refuse treatment? No. Did you want him to die? Mira's face tightened. Of course not. Then you must examine what happened honestly. Dante said, but honesty is not the same as accepting every accusation. Mira stared at the child. I should have saved Aaron. Could anyone promise that? No. Then your pain is asking you to control what no human being controls. The nun finally spoke. Right effort belongs to us. The result does not belong to us completely. This is difficult to accept. We want good effort to guarantee good results. We want kindness to guarantee love. We want careful work to guarantee success. We want prayer to guarantee healing. But life does not offer such agreements. Buddhist teaching speaks of causes and conditions. Many things come together to create one result. The body, time, weather, past illness, available medicine, care, chance. No single person holds all of them. This does not remove responsibility. It places responsibility where it truly belongs. Mira walked back to the bed. She cooled the child's forehead. She checked his breathing. She prepared the herbs. Her hands still trembled, but they moved. The mother watched. Will he live? She asked. Mira paused. The old fear returned. She wanted to promise. She wanted approval. She also wanted to protect herself by refusing hope. Instead, she told the truth. I do not know. The mother began to cry. Mira sat beside her. But I know what care he needs now. They worked through the afternoon. By evening, the child's fever began to fall. His breathing became easier. The mother held Mira's hands. Thank you. The words entered Mira, but she did not build a home inside them. The child improved. Another patient might not. That truth remained. The next morning, Mira opened the healing house fully for the first time in weeks. Some villagers came. Others stayed away. One man entered, saw Dante, and left. A woman whispered that Mira was now accepting help from criminals. Mira heard her. She continued grinding herbs. This was not complete freedom. Her chest still tightened when people questioned her. But fear no longer made every choice. Later, Mira sat outside with Dante. Why did you help me? She asked. Because someone helped me see the difference between remorse and shame. I did not commit a crime. No, but you were punishing yourself as though grief proved guilt. Mira looked toward the mountain path. Aaron's father still hates me. Perhaps he always will. Her face fell. Dante understood. He had wanted the merchant's family to forgive him. Mira wanted Aaron's father to clear her name. Both believed peace depended on another person's approval. The nun joined them. Mira, she said, have you spoken to him since the funeral? No. Why? He will not listen. Have you tried? Mira hesitated. Once. He shouted before I reached the house. And after that, I stayed away. The nun looked toward the village. His anger may not change. Mira nodded. But avoiding him has allowed your mind to imagine something even larger. What should I say? The truth. That I did everything I could. Only if that is true. It is. Then say it. And if he rejects it, Danta answered, then he rejects it. The words were the same lesson the widow had learned before sending her letter. Doing what is right does not guarantee approval. Mira packed a small bag of herbs, not because Arun's father was sick, because she needed something to hold. Danta walked beside her. The nun followed at a distance. They found the old man near his son's empty field. He was cutting weeds with angry movements. When he saw Mira, he stopped. You. His face hardened. Mira's courage nearly disappeared. Danta remained beside her, not in front. She had to speak for herself. I came to talk about Arun. There is nothing to say. There is something I need to say. You killed my son. The words struck her. She felt the whole village's judgment return. Her hands tightened around the herb bag. Then she breathed. I did not kill him. The old man stepped closer. You let him die. I stayed with him for 3 nights. You failed. Yes. Mira's voice broke. I failed to save him. The old man looked surprised. She continued. But failing to save someone is not the same as not caring. His anger rose. What good is your care to a dead man? Mira's eyes filled. It does not bring him back. Then leave. She almost turned. Then Danta spoke softly. Anger did not bring back the man I killed either. The old father looked at him. Who are you? A man who thought suffering forever would repair what could not be repaired. The father gripped the cutting tool. My son had children. I know, Mira said. They wake asking for him. I know. You still sleep. Mira did not defend herself. Some words must be allowed to land. I am sorry, she said. Sorry? Yes. I am sorry he died. I am sorry your family is carrying this pain. I am sorry my care was not enough. The old man's face changed, not into forgiveness, into grief. The anger had held him upright for months. Now, for one moment, it loosened. He sat beside the field. Mira sat several steps away. They did not touch. They did not resolve everything. But for the first time, they shared the same sorrow without turning it into a battle. After a long silence, the father said, The whole village should know what you did. Mira thought he meant her failure. Then he added, They should know you stayed. She looked at him. He was not forgiving her, not yet, perhaps not ever, but his certainty had cracked. As they left, Danta looked back. The old man remained in the empty field. His anger had demanded that the village agree with him. It had made shared blame feel like love for his son. Now he was beginning to see that a crowd could confirm anger without healing grief. And the next lesson was already waiting inside the people he had taught to condemn. And the next lesson was already waiting inside the people he had taught to condemn. Arun's father sat alone beside the empty field. For months he had not truly been alone. Even when no one stood beside him, the village voices remained. Mira failed him. Mira chose the wrong medicine. Mira should never treat another family. At first those words came from him. Then others repeated them. Each repetition made his anger feel more certain. When a neighbor agreed, he felt stronger. When someone questioned him, he felt betrayed. He began visiting homes. He told the story again and again. He described Arun's final days. He spoke of Mira's herbs, her tired hands, the moment she admitted she could not save him. Every time he told it, the story changed slightly. Mira became more careless, more distant, more guilty. Grief had become a fire. Agreement became the wood he kept feeding it. We recognize this. When we are hurt, we often want witnesses, not only people who see our pain, people who agree about who caused it. We tell the story to one friend, then another. We watch their faces. We feel relief when they become angry for us. Their anger makes ours feel justified. Their judgment makes our judgment feel true. But agreement does not always bring healing. Sometimes it only builds a larger room for suffering to live in. Aaron's father did not know what to do with sorrow. He knew how to work. He knew how to repair a roof. He knew when to plant grain. He knew how to carry a sleeping child without waking him. But he did not know how to wake each morning in a world where his son no longer existed. So he found something easier to carry: blame. Blame gave him direction. It told him where to look. It gave him words when grief had none. It allowed him to stand before the village instead of falling apart inside his own home. But blame also demanded that everyone join him. A woman once said, "Mira stayed with Aaron every night." The father stopped speaking to her. An old man said, "Some illnesses cannot be cured." The father accused him of defending the healer. A child asked why Mira would want Aaron to die. The father shouted until the child ran away. Pain had narrowed his world. There was only loyalty and betrayal, agreement and rejection. Anyone who did not condemn Mira seemed to be condemning him. This is how suffering can turn approval into proof. We no longer ask whether people care. We ask whether they agree with our anger. The next morning, a monk arrived from the mountain monastery. He had heard about the village conflict. He found Aaron's father sitting outside his house. Several neighbors were nearby. The father was telling the story again. "Mira knew the medicine was not working," he said. A woman nodded. "She should have sent for another healer." "The roads were blocked," someone said softly. The father turned sharply. "Then you defend her too?" The person lowered his eyes. The monk sat beneath a tree. He did not interrupt. He listened until the father finished. Then he asked, "How many times have you told this story?" The father frowned. "What does that matter? I am trying to understand. I have told it as many times as needed. Has it changed what happened?" "No." "Has it brought your son back?" The father's face hardened. "No." "Has it reduced your pain?" The villagers became quiet. The father looked away. "That is not the point." "What is the point?" "That people know the truth." The monk nodded. "And when everyone agrees with you, what happens inside?" The father answered quickly, "I know I am right." And then the question remained. The father had never asked what came after agreement. People condemned Mira. They avoided the healing house. They repeated his accusations. Still, he woke at night reaching for a son who was gone. Still, Arun's children cried. Still, the field remained empty. The crowd had agreed. Nothing had healed. The monk said, "You have gathered many people around your anger, because anger feels heavy when carried alone." The father looked at him. The monk continued, "But when others carry it with you, it does not disappear. It only becomes shared." The father's hands tightened. She failed him. Yes. The answer surprised him. The monk did not defend Mira. He did not say everything had gone well. He did not deny that a young man died beneath her care. "Mira failed to save your son," the monk said. "That is true." The father nodded. "Then why should I release her?" "I did not ask you to release her." "What are you asking?" "To release the belief that blaming her can repair what happened." The father stood. "You speak as though my anger is wrong." "No." The monk's voice remained gentle. "Anger is often the mind's first answer to deep loss. It arrives because something mattered. But an answer that arrives first is not always the one we should keep forever." The father looked toward Aaron's empty field. The weeds had grown high. He had not planted that season. He told himself the land no longer mattered. But the truth was simpler. The field reminded him of his son. They had worked there together. Arun had laughed when birds stole the seed. He had complained about the heat. He had promised to build a new fence before the rains. Now every part of the land carried his absence. The father asked, "What should I carry instead of anger?" The monk said, "Grief." The word felt unbearable. At least anger lets me stand. For a while. And grief? Grief teaches you to kneel. The father turned away. He did not want to kneel. He did not want to cry before the village. He did not want people to see that beneath every accusation was a father who still expected to hear footsteps outside the door. The monk said, "You have been asking the village to agree because agreement feels like protection." Protection from what? From helplessness. The father closed his eyes. There it was. He had not protected Arun. He had watched his son weaken. He had stood beside the bed while Mira worked. He had begged, prayed, demanded. Nothing changed the result. Blaming the healer made him feel less helpless. If Mira caused the death, then the world had an order. Find the guilty person, condemn them, punish them. But if Mira had tried and Arun still died, then life was more uncertain than the father wanted to admit. Sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes skill is not enough. Sometimes a person can do everything possible and still lose someone. This truth was harder than blame. The monk picked up a stone. If 10 people tell you this stone is light, does it become lighter? No. If 10 people say it is heavy, no. Then agreement does not change the stone. He placed it on the ground. Agreement also does not change grief. The villagers began leaving quietly. Some felt ashamed, others felt relieved. They had carried the father's anger because they did not know how else to support him. Soon only the monk remained. The father sat again. "What happens if I stop blaming her?" "You may feel what the blame was covering." "I do not think I can bear it." "You have already been bearing it." The monk pointed toward his chest, only with anger wrapped around it. The father began to cry, not loudly. The tears came slowly, then with years of force. He cried for Arun, for the children who would grow without him, for the words he had not said, for the ordinary mornings he had believed would continue forever. The monk stayed. He did not tell him to calm down. He did not say everything happened for a reason. He did not offer a lesson too soon. Some pain needs company before it needs meaning. When the tears ended, the father looked exhausted, but something had changed. The anger had not vanished. It had loosened, enough for sorrow to breathe. The next day he walked to Mira's healing house. He stood outside for a long time. When she saw him, fear entered her face. He noticed. "I told many people you were careless," he said. Mira waited. "I wanted them to hate you. I know. I thought if enough people agreed, I would feel better." "Did you?" "No." The answer was quiet. He did not ask for forgiveness. She did not offer it. He only said, "I will tell them you stayed with Arun." Mira's eyes filled. The father continued, "I am still angry. You are allowed to be. I do not know what to do with it. Neither do I." For the first time, they did not stand as healer and accuser, only 2 people carrying the same death differently. A week later, the father decided to walk to a sacred monastery beyond the eastern hills. He wanted silence. He wanted to sit where no one knew his story. He wanted to discover who he was without the village repeating his anger back to him. The monk agreed to guide him part of the way. They followed a mountain road through pine trees and narrow valleys. On the second afternoon, they reached a resting place crowded with travelers. A wealthy merchant stood near the entrance. Servants surrounded him. He was giving away costly gifts, silk cloth, silver cups, small boxes of perfume. People praised his generosity. The merchant smiled each time. Then he looked around quickly, making sure everyone had seen. A poor porter stood nearby, holding the empty gift chests. The merchant gave another silver cup to a stranger. "You will remember who gave this to you?" he asked. The stranger bowed deeply. The merchant's smile returned. Aaron's father watched. He had gathered agreement to support his anger. This man gathered gratitude to support his worth. Different hunger, the same dependence. The father had begun releasing the crowd's approval. The merchant was still trying to purchase it. The father had begun releasing the crowd's approval. The merchant was still trying to purchase it. He stood beside the mountain road in a robe made from fine blue silk. A gold ring shone on each hand. Behind him were 3 wooden chests. One held silver cups, one held perfume, one held small pieces of cloth brought from distant cities. Travelers gathered around him. The merchant enjoyed the sound of their praise. "You are generous. You have a noble heart. No one else gives like you." He smiled each time. Then he looked toward the next person, waiting, measuring, needing more. Beside the chest stood a thin porter named Savvy. His clothes were plain, his sandals were worn. He had carried the merchant's goods over 2 mountain roads. No one praised him. Most people barely noticed he was there. The merchant lifted a silver cup. He gave it to a man he had met only that morning. The man bowed deeply. "I will never forget you." The merchant's face brightened. Savvy closed the empty chest. He had heard the same promise many times. The merchant gave gifts wherever he traveled. He gave food to officials. He gave cloth to wealthy families. He paid for expensive meals. He lent money and refused repayment while others were watching. People called him kind. People invited him into their homes. People sat near him at public gatherings. But the merchant rarely gave without expecting something to return. Not always money. Sometimes praise, sometimes loyalty, sometimes protection, sometimes the comfort of knowing that people needed him. We recognize this. There are gifts given from love, and there are gifts given from fear. The object may look the same, the hand may look generous, but inside the mind may be making a bargain. I will help you, so you will not leave me. I will please you, so you will speak well of me. I will give more than I can afford, so I will feel important. The merchant called this friendship, but friendship purchased with gifts becomes uncertain the moment the gifts stop. That evening, the merchant invited several travelers to eat with him. He paid for rice, vegetables, tea, and sweet cakes. The table became crowded. Everyone laughed at his stories. A musician played near the fire. One man placed an arm around the merchant's shoulder. "You are like a brother to me." They had met 2 days earlier. The merchant believed him, or wanted to. Savvy sat several steps away. He ate a small bowl of rice alone. The merchant noticed. "Savvy, why do you not join us? There is no space." There is always space for a loyal servant. Several men moved slightly, not enough to create a place. Savvy looked at the crowded table. "I am comfortable here." The merchant frowned. He wanted Savvy to be grateful. He wanted everyone to see how well he treated a poor worker. But the porter did not perform gratitude. He simply ate. Later that night, the merchant counted his coins. He kept them inside a leather bag beneath his sleeping cloth. Savvy saw him hide it. "So much money should not remain near the open road," the porter said. The merchant laughed. "My friends are all around me." Savvy looked toward the sleeping travelers. Some had known the merchant for a week, some for a day. One had arrived only before dinner. "Friends?" Savvy asked. The merchant heard doubt. "You think poorly of everyone." "I do not know them." "They praised me." "Yes." "They ate with me." "Yes." "They promised to remain loyal." Savvy nodded. "And none of that tells us what they will do when there is nothing left to receive." The merchant became angry. "You are jealous." "Of what?" "Of the respect they give me." Savvy looked at the bag of coins, then at the sleeping men. I hope it is respect." The merchant turned away. He did not like people who asked questions that praise could not answer. Before sunrise, he woke suddenly. The leather bag was gone. He searched beneath his cloth, then inside the chest, then around the fire. Nothing. "My money!" he shouted. The travelers woke. The merchant ran from person to person. "Did you see anyone near me?" No one had. "Help me search." Some did. For a few minutes, they looked behind stones. They checked the road. They opened one empty chest. Then interest faded. One man said he needed to leave before the sun became hot. Another remembered urgent business. A third said he had never promised to guard the merchant's belongings. The man who had called him a brother was the first to disappear. The merchant watched them gather their gifts, the silver cups, the silk cloth, the perfume. He wanted to ask them to return everything, but the gifts had been given before witnesses. Taking them back would make him look small, so he stood silently while his companions left. One by one, the resting place became empty. Only Savi remained. The merchant looked at him. "Why are you still here?" "You hired me to carry the chests to the next town. There is nothing valuable left in them. They are still heavy." The merchant studied his face. "Did you take the money?" "No." "How can I know?" "You cannot." The answer angered him. "You should defend yourself." "I told you the truth. That is all. That is what I have." The merchant looked down the road. His friends were gone. The man he had often ignored remained, not because of gifts, not because of praise, not because the merchant was powerful. Savi remained because he had agreed to finish the journey. This was unfamiliar. The merchant sat on one of the chests. His shoulders dropped. "I gave them everything." "No," Savi said. The merchant looked up sharply. "I fed them." "You did." "I gave them gifts." "Yes, I treated them like family." Savi sat on the ground nearby. "You gave them objects. What else is friendship?" "Truth." The merchant said nothing. "Time, presence. Remaining when the room becomes quiet." Savi looked toward the road. "Not every person who accepts a gift has accepted your heart." The words hurt. The merchant had believed generosity would protect him from loneliness. As a child, he had lived in a house where affection followed success. When he brought home profit, his father praised him. When he failed, silence filled the room. He learned early that value could be earned. Later, he turned that lesson outward. He bought meals, paid debts, covered expenses, and waited for love to appear. Sometimes it did, but because he had purchased the beginning, he never trusted the result. Even while surrounded by people, he remained afraid they would leave, so he gave more. The fear grew, the gifts became larger, the friendships became less certain. This is what happens when approval becomes a trade. No amount is enough. We begin asking hidden questions. Would they still call if I had nothing? Would they still stay if I stopped helping? Would they still see value in me if I could no longer provide? The merchant had never allowed himself to discover the answer. Now the stolen money had answered part of it. Most had left. Savi had not. "Why do you stay?" the merchant asked again. The porter thought, "Because leaving you alone here would not be right. Even after I called you jealous." "Yes." "Even though I did not invite you to the table." "Yes." "Why?" Savi looked at him. "Because your behavior decides who you are. It does not have to decide who I am." The merchant felt something quiet inside him. Not relief, not yet. Something closer to shame, but not the shame that says, "I am worthless." The kind that says, "I have been living poorly, and I can choose differently." They carried the empty chests toward the next town. Without servants, the merchant took one side. Savvy took the other. The road climbed. The merchant's hands began to hurt. He had never understood the weight Savvy carried each day. At midday, they stopped beside a spring. The merchant had no food. Savvy opened a cloth bundle. Inside were 2 pieces of bread. He gave one to the merchant. "What do you want in return?" the merchant asked. Savvy looked confused. "Nothing." The merchant held the bread. No audience, no praise, no hidden bargain. Only food given because someone was hungry. He ate slowly. That evening they reached a small village. The merchant expected Savvy to leave. Instead, the porter helped him find a place to sleep. Before resting, the merchant said, "I have no money to pay you. You can pay me later. You trust me?" "I trust that I chose to finish the work." The merchant smiled sadly. "You speak plainly. Would you prefer praise?" The merchant almost said yes. Then he laughed. A real laugh. The first one not performed for a crowd. The next morning, they went to report the theft. Along the road, they met several travelers. One praised the merchant's robe. The merchant felt the old hunger rise. He wanted to explain who he was, how wealthy he had been, how many gifts he had given. Instead, he thanked the man and continued. Savvy watched him. The merchant said, "Do you always tell people uncomfortable truths when silence would cause harm? And do they like you?" "Some do. Some do not." The merchant waited. Savvy added, "That is not how I decide whether the truth should be spoken." For years, the merchant had surrounded himself with flattering voices. Now, the only person who remained was the one who had never flattered him. And the next lesson was already walking beside him in worn sandals, carrying nothing except honesty. And the next lesson was already walking beside him in worn sandals, carrying nothing except honesty. Savvy walked ahead on the mountain road. The merchant followed. The empty chests felt heavier now, not because their weight had changed, because the merchant was carrying part of them himself. For years he had paid others to hold what was heavy: goods, money, work, silence, even truth. He surrounded himself with people who told him what he wanted to hear. Savvy did not. That made the porter difficult to like, at least at first. The merchant looked at him and said, "You speak as though you understand everything." Savvy kept walking. "I do not." "You always have an answer." "No, I only answer when you ask." The merchant frowned. "Then perhaps I should stop asking. That may make the road quieter." There was no insult in Savvy's voice. That made the merchant even more irritated. He wanted the porter to defend himself, to apologize, to show fear. Savvy did none of these things. We recognize this feeling. A flattering person makes us comfortable. An honest person can make us restless. Praise lets us remain where we are. Truth asks us to move, and the mind often calls that movement disrespect. The merchant had spent many years rewarding people who agreed with him. A servant who praised his plans received better food. A partner who questioned him was pushed aside. A friend who admired his generosity was invited closer. A friend who asked why he needed to give so much was called ungrateful. Slowly, the merchant built a world where no one challenged him. He believed this meant he was loved. But a room without honest speech is not always peaceful. Sometimes it is only afraid. They reached a narrow part of the road. Loose stones covered the path. Savvy stopped. "Take the left side." The merchant looked ahead. "The right side is shorter. It is also weak." "How do you know?" "The ground has cracked." The merchant studied it. He did not see anything dangerous. "You think I cannot judge a road?" Savvy looked at the chests. "I think you are tired." The merchant heard an insult. "I am not tired." "You are breathing heavily." "That does not mean I am tired." "No." Savvy nodded. "It means your body is." The merchant became angry. He stepped onto the right side. The ground broke beneath his foot. One leg slipped toward the edge. The chest pulled him sideways. Savi dropped his own side and grabbed the merchant's arm. For one moment, stones rolled into the valley below. Then Savi pulled him back. The merchant sat on the road, breathing hard. Neither spoke. After a while, the merchant said, "You could have said it more gently." I said, "Take the left side." "You could have explained." "I did. You made me feel foolish." Savi looked toward the broken ground. "The cliff did not care how the warning made you feel." The merchant stared at him. Again, the words hurt. Again, they were true. This does not mean truth should be cruel. Honesty without compassion can become pride. Some people use truth to make themselves feel superior. They say, "I am only being honest," while enjoying the wound they create. Savi was not like that. He did not speak to win. He did not speak to embarrass. He spoke because the road was dangerous, because the merchant was tired, because silence would have caused harm. That is a different kind of honesty. The Buddhist tradition teaches right speech, not only true speech. Right speech asks more. Is it true? Is it useful? Is it spoken at the right time? Is the mind behind it free from the wish to harm? Savi's words were plain, sometimes sharp, but they were not poisoned. The merchant stood, his leg trembled. Savi lifted the chest again. "Can you continue?" The merchant almost said yes. The old answer, the proud answer, the answer that protected the image. Then he stopped. "I need to rest." Savi placed the chest down. They sat beneath a tree. The merchant rubbed his leg. "This is what you meant when you said I was tired." "Yes." "You did not think I was weak." "No." "Why not?" "Because tired and weak are not the same word." The merchant looked at him. It was such a simple sentence. Still, it reached something deep. The merchant had always believed weakness must be hidden. He had built his whole life around appearing powerful. His money, his gifts, his large meals, his crowded table, all of it protected him from one fear, that without wealth no one would respect him. But Savi had seen him tired, frightened, robbed and foolish, and he was still there. Not admiring, not flattering. There. Presence felt different from approval. Approval often looked upward. Presence sat beside him. The merchant said, "Do you respect me?" Savi thought carefully. "Sometimes." The merchant laughed once, not with joy. "With all I have done for you, you hired me. I fed you. You paid for work. I treated you better than many employers. That is true. Then why only sometimes?" Savi met his eyes. "Because respect should follow conduct." The merchant's face tightened. "There it is again." "What?" "The insult hidden inside your calm voice." Savi shook his head. "I said some of your conduct deserves respect. And the rest does not." The merchant stood too quickly. "You forget your place." Savi remained seated. "No." "You are a porter." "Yes." "I am a merchant." "Yes." "You should speak with care." "I do." The merchant wanted to dismiss him. He wanted to say the journey was over. He wanted to take back the bread, the help, the company, but the money was gone. The servants were gone. The flattering friends were gone. Only the honest porter remained, and the merchant suddenly saw how often power had protected him from hearing the truth. People had not agreed because he was wise. They had agreed because he controlled what they needed: food, work, money, access. This realization felt like another theft. But this time what was stolen was an illusion. The merchant sat again. "What conduct do you not respect?" Savi did not answer immediately. He looked at the merchant's face. "Do you truly want to know?" The merchant almost said yes quickly. Then he understood why Savi asked. Wanting truth in words is easy. Receiving it in the body is different. "Yes," he said. Savi spoke slowly. You give so people will depend on you. The merchant looked away. You call praise friendship. Silence. You ask for loyalty, but you do not listen when people disagree. The merchant's jaw tightened. You are kind when others can see. That is enough. Savvy stopped. The merchant waited. Is there more? Yes. Then say it. You are afraid. The merchant looked back sharply. Of what? Being ordinary. The road became very quiet. The merchant had expected criticism. He had not expected recognition. Being ordinary. No silk, no gifts, no people gathering, no one saying his name with admiration. He had spent years running from that possibility. What is wrong with wanting to matter? He asked. Nothing. What is wrong with wanting people to stay? Nothing. Then why do you judge me? I am not judging the desire. Savvy said, I am showing you the chain. The merchant looked at the empty chests. Every gift had been a link, every purchased meal, every public act of generosity, every friendship he had tried to secure. The chain had looked golden. It was still a chain. The merchant asked, why did no one else tell me this? Some tried. He remembered a business partner who said he spent too much to impress officials, a sister who told him people loved his table more than his company, an old servant who warned that praise was making him careless. He had dismissed them all. You insult me. You envy me. You do not understand generosity. The honest voices had left. The flattering ones remained, until the money disappeared. The merchant covered his face with both hands. I thought everyone loved me. Savvy said nothing. This was not the moment for more truth. Some truths need silence after them. They need room to settle. The merchant began to cry, not loudly. He cried for the stolen money, for the people who had left, for the years spent buying what could not be bought. Savvy did not comfort him with lies. He did not say the merchant had done nothing wrong. He did not promise that everyone would return. He sat beside him. That was enough. Later, they continued toward the monastery. The road became steeper. The merchant spoke less. When Savvy warned him about loose ground, he listened. When he became tired, he said so. When they passed travelers, he did not tell them about his former wealth. Something inside him had begun to loosen. Near sunset, they heard a sound from behind a large roadside stone. A quick breath. Then cloth moving. Savvy stopped. Someone is there. A young woman stepped partly into view. She wore the clothes of a dancer. Small bells were tied around her ankles, but she had wrapped cloth around them so they would not make a sound. Her face was painted. Her eyes were afraid. Are you lost? The merchant asked. No. Are you hurt? No. Then why are you hiding? The dancer looked toward the road behind them. There is a festival in the next village. You were meant to perform? She nodded. Then why are you here? Her hands tightened around the cloth covering the bells. Because I forgot my steps yesterday. Savvy waited. The dancer continued. People laughed. The merchant understood the fear immediately. One public failure, one room full of watching faces, one moment that seemed large enough to erase everything else. Will you return? He asked. The dancer shook her head. I cannot dance while they are watching. Savvy looked at her hidden bells. The merchant had spent years performing generosity for approval. The dancer had lost the ability to perform because approval had become necessary. Different stage. The same prison. And the next story waited inside a dance no one had yet seen. And the next story waited inside a dance no one had yet seen. The young woman stood beside the road with cloth wrapped around the bells at her ankles. Her name was Lila. She had danced since childhood. At first, dancing had been simple. Music entered her body answered. She did not think about the position of her hands. She did not wonder whether every step looked graceful. She moved because movement made her feel alive. When she was a child, she danced in the courtyard behind her mother's house. There was no audience, no applause, no one judging whether she was good enough. Only dust beneath her feet, birds in the trees, her mother washing clothes nearby. That was when Lila danced with the most freedom. Then people began noticing her. A neighbor praised her movements. A teacher invited her to perform at a village celebration. A wealthy family paid her to dance at a wedding. Soon, people expected beauty from her. At first, their praise felt wonderful. Children copied her steps. Older women called her gifted. Strangers said no one moved with such grace. Lila listened to every word. Then she began waiting for those words. This is how joy can slowly become a burden. We begin with something we love. Then people praise us for it. Soon we stop asking whether the act brings us peace. We begin asking whether it will impress them. The action may look the same from the outside, but inside, everything has changed. Lila began watching the audience while she danced. A smile made her confident. A whisper made her forget the next step. A person leaving early felt like rejection. Someone crossing their arms became proof that she had failed. She no longer heard only the music. She heard judgment, even before anyone judged her. The merchant looked at the cloth covering her bells. "What happened yesterday?" he asked. Lila sat on a flat stone beside the road. There was a harvest festival in the valley. Were many people there? Hundreds. She looked down at her feet. I began well. The drums had started. She entered the village square. The first movements came easily. Then she noticed two women whispering near the front. One pointed toward her feet. Lila did not know what they were saying. Perhaps they were discussing something else. Perhaps they were admiring the bells. But the frightened mind does not wait for the truth. It creates its own answer. They think I am too slow. They saw my mistake. They regret inviting me. Her body became tight. The next step came late. She turned in the wrong direction. A few children laughed. Only children. Only one brief moment. But the sound entered her deeply. The music continued. Lila tried to recover. Then she forgot the whole sequence. She stood in the center of the square while the drums played around her. The audience became quiet. Someone coughed. Someone whispered. One man laughed. Lila ran. She did not stop until the festival disappeared behind the hills. The porter sat near her. And today? I was invited to perform at the monastery festival. Do you want to dance there? Yes? Then go. Lila shook her head. I cannot. You walked this far. Walking is not dancing. No. Savi looked at her carefully, but fear is already controlling both. Lila tightened the cloth around her bells. What if I forget again? You may. What if people laugh? They may. What if everyone remembers? Some might. The merchant looked at Savi. You are not comforting her. Savi replied, She does not need a promise I cannot keep. Lila looked at him. Then what do I need? To remember why you danced before anyone praised you. The question entered her slowly. She thought of the old courtyard, bare feet, dust, her mother nearby, no painted face, no festival clothes, no one measuring her movements. I danced because it made me feel free, she said. What changed? People began watching. Savi shook his head. People watched before. Not like this. What became different? Lila looked toward the ground. I began watching them. The porter nodded. There it was. The audience had not entered her dance. She had brought them inside herself. Every face became a judge. Every movement stood before a court. She had stopped moving through her body. She was performing inside other people's imagined opinions. We all do this in different ways. We speak while checking whether others approve. We work while wondering whether anyone is impressed. We help while waiting to be thanked. We live as though an invisible audience is always present. Then we wonder why simple things begin to feel heavy. Savi stood. "Remove the cloth." Lila looked toward the road. "Someone may hear the bells. Yes, I am not ready. You do not need to perform." "Then what should I do?" "Move. That is dancing." "Not yet." He pointed toward a quiet clearing between the trees. No stage. No festival. No one waiting for you to succeed. The merchant raised an eyebrow. "We are here." Savi looked at him. "We can turn away." They both turned their backs. The merchant faced the road. Savi looked toward the trees. Lila remained behind them. For a while nothing happened. Then she slowly removed the cloth. The bells made a small sound. She stood with her arms by her sides. No music, no instructions, no applause waiting at the end. She lifted one foot, then placed it down. The bells answered. She moved the other foot. At first, every movement was careful, too careful. She was still imagining eyes behind her. Savi spoke without turning. "Do not dance well." Lila almost laughed. "What?" "Dance badly. I do not know how." "You did yesterday." The merchant smiled. Lila felt annoyed. Then something lighter entered her. The demand for beauty had been removed. She made an awkward turn on purpose. Her foot struck a stone. The bells rang unevenly. Nothing terrible happened. She moved again. Too quickly, then too slowly. She raised her arms in a way no teacher had taught her. A laugh escaped her. This time the laughter came from her own mouth. Savi remained facing away. The merchant did not turn. Lila stopped performing. She began playing. Her body remembered, not the exact steps from the festival. Something older, something beneath memory. Her feet followed the wind moving through the trees. Her hands followed the shape of the branches. The bells became part of the road. She no longer asked whether the dance looked beautiful. That was why beauty returned. Freedom often comes back this way, not by forcing confidence, by releasing the demand to succeed. Lila danced until she was breathing hard. Then she became still. Savi turned around. "How was it?" he asked. Lila almost asked, "Was I good?" The old question reached her lips. Then she stopped. "I felt free," Savi nodded. "That answer belongs to you." They continued toward the monastery together. Lila did not know whether she would dance at the festival, but she had stopped saying she could not dance. There was a difference. At the monastery gate, they heard drums. Villagers had gathered in the courtyard. Lanterns hung from ropes. Children carried flowers. Monks stood near the temple steps. Lila stopped walking. The audience was real now. So was the fear. Her hands became cold. The memory of the previous day returned. The silence, the laughter, the missing steps. Savi said, "You do not have to dance." Lila looked at him. "I thought you would tell me to be brave." "Bravery is not obedience." "What if I walk away?" "Then walk away honestly." Lila listened to the drums. Beneath the fear, something else was present. Desire. She wanted to move, not to prove that she was still talented, not to erase yesterday, only to dance. She entered the courtyard. The festival organizer saw her. "We thought you would not come." "I almost did not." "Are you ready?" "No." The honest answer surprised them both. Lila stepped into the open space anyway. People turned toward her. The drums began. For the first few breaths, she watched the crowd. Then she noticed herself watching. She returned to the music. One step, then another. A child whispered. A man near the gate looked away. Two women smiled. Someone left the courtyard. The world continued to contain praise, indifference, and judgment. Lila allowed all of it to remain. She did not need the audience to become one mind. She only needed to stop giving them control of her body. The sequence from the previous day returned. At the place where she had forgotten, fear rose again. Her foot hesitated. The courtyard became quiet. Then Lila changed the step, not because she had failed. Because movement was alive, she turned in a new direction. The bells rang. The dance continued. When she finished, applause came, warm, loud, pleasant. But Lila's freedom had arrived before it. On the temple steps stood an elderly monk. He was the monastery's senior elder. His robe was always perfect. His back was always straight. His face was always serious. He believed discipline required a person to appear firm at all times. He had not smiled in so many years that younger monks believed he had forgotten how. During Lila's changed step, something unexpected happened. The elder's mouth moved. Only slightly. A small smile appeared. Then he quickly hid it. Lila saw him. So did Savvy. The dancer had spent years fearing the judgment of others. The elder had spent years protecting an image of perfection. Her freedom had reached him. Now he would have to ask what his seriousness had been hiding. And as we continue, remember this: freedom begins when you stop performing for every watching eye. Stay with us for the next Buddhist story.